Conspiracies, government cover-ups, Earth mysteries, monster cryptids, psyops, saucers and black triangles, her panwo.
Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Herpanwo TV. Yeah, and welcome to what might be my last ever video. Yes, because we're going to go through the ultimate test. The ultimate test that might end up with me becoming a skeptic. You and I together, are going to do a conspiracy theory deconversion course. It's how to deprogram people. As I said, how to pull people out of the conspiratorial rabbit hole. If you have a friend, this is advertised as something. If you have a friend or relative who is a conspiracy theorist and they've been down the rabbit hole into sort of weird ideas, right? Showing them these videos may pull them out of it. Yeah, it's actually not a. It's not like you saw on the title screen, the shot from the aversion therapy shot from A Clockwork Orange. It's not like that. It's a lot gentler than that. It's just we just watch a few videos together now, and at the end of it, we might become skeptics. Or at least even if I don't, some of you watching this might become skeptics. And if you do, then you're going to stop watching me. So I might lose some viewers as a result of this video, even if I myself carry on making Herpanwo TV videos. So I got this idea. First of all, I've got to apologise. I'm using my spare webcam at the moment. The reason is, it looks like my normal webcam is not playing ball with me at the moment. It's actually being awkward at the moment. I might have to replace it. So I'm using my old spare webcam right now. I got this idea from I do watch, and some of you have mentioned this chap, Brent Lee, and this is him here. I'll just show him to you. You probably I've mentioned this guy before, Brent Lee. Now, Brent Lee usually it's in conjunction with Neil Sanders, and I know a lot of you mentioned Neil Sanders. This is Brent Lee on Twitter. That's Brent Lee on YouTube. This is him on Twitter. And oh, this account doesn't exist. Oh, right. Okay. Well, that's strange because I do follow him. Let's have a look. Hang on. Maybe it's a different one here. Here he is. Oh, this is him. Oh, he follows me too. There we go. This is Brent Lee. And he says, tinfoil confessions, escaping the cult of conspiracy, sharing my journey out of the rabbit hole, ex-conspiracy theorist of 15 years, and host of Some Dare Call It Conspiracy podcast. Right, that is Brent. Now, Brent is now. I believe it or not, I actually remember Brent. Having to go through some of my old. I have to go through some of my old material. By the way, what you see there, you can see. I don't know how well you can see it, but this is a picture of somebody escaping from the cult of conspiracy. You see the Illuminati symbol there, escaping from the cult of conspiracy. So this is Brent is someone I actually remember. I don't think I ever met him, unless I did so and forgot. He didn't go along to the David Icke Forum meetups, I know that much. But he was on the David Icke Forum, and in the early 2000s when we were all conspiracy theorists together. And I remember he used to make lots of posts on there. Excuse me. Well, you can go to his YouTube channel and you can read his story. Indeed, you can actually follow several of his media posts, because he's actually been in the mainstream media a couple of times, talking about how he's a reformed character from being a tinfoil hat wearing nutter like me. So you can go and check him out there. No, don't give him a hard time. I disclaimer, right? If you get any abuse, it's not because it's not my views, all right? Because I'm telling you now, disclaimer, please do not approach him in a hostile manner, all right? I'm not just saying that as a legal disclaimer. I actually don't feel any resentment towards Brent. I actually never got angry with people because of their opinions. I've got frustrated sometimes, and I am this time because I think Brent is making a big mistake. But I don't get angry and resentful towards people for their opinions. I get angry with people according to because of their conduct, like the trolls I have to deal with. That's what makes me angry. So I don't actually feel any hostility towards Brent for his decisions. And the reason this has come up before, because I know a lot more of you probably are familiar with Neil Sanders. Well, Neil Sanders, of course, he was one of Richard D. Hall's favored few, wasn't he? And he wrote a great book about mind control, actually. But he's actually now joined Brent, and he actually is the co-host of this radio show they do called Some Dare Call It Conspiracy. And you can actually, he hasn't put much on YouTube lately, but excuse me. But what he does is he has his radio show on other things as well. He has his radio show on other places as well. And this is what gave me the idea to do this, because this particular show, because Brent was just like me. I mean, Brent came into, he says in 2003, to give you a basics of his story, in 2003, he started looking at various online content related to conspiracies. It's just after 9/11, the start of the Iraq invasion. And he got into David Icke, he got into Jordan Maxwell, Alex Jones, just like me. In fact, I was started a bit before him, actually. I was already getting a bit woo-woo by the mid-90s, actually, myself. But he came in a little bit later than that, after having a fairly normal life. And for 15 years, like he said, he describes himself as hardcore for 15 years. And then several things happened which made him question this. And he started having questions over the Shady Nook shooting. I can't say what the word is, when a number of children were actually killed in a shooting at a school. Because he felt this was a really nasty thing to do. To question that was actually a pretty nasty thing to do, to say that maybe that didn't happen and all is not as it seems. I personally disagree with that, and I think it's not actually immoral to question these things if there's good reason to. But Brent thought otherwise, and he to be honest, one thing I do one revulsion I do share with him is the conduct of some people in the conspirasphere. And indeed, I always told people from the start, don't approach these people. These people who say they're the parents of these children and they're on TV, etc. Do not approach them. All right. Then three things happened which he didn't expect. He describes his surprise when, first of all, Brexit happened. Then the vote happened. The Brexit vote came down as leave. Then Donald Trump became US president. Then Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the opposition. Now, none of these things were intended by the Illuminati. And he thought, well, hang on a minute. These Illuminati are supposed to be, if they're controlling everything, how come this happened? And then he decided just to completely to log out of social media, get completely out of the whole situation, and just take some time off from the internet to focus on himself and contemplate what all this was about, which he did. And then basically just about 2 years ago, he came back with he and Neil Sanders. Neil Sanders is obviously going through the same process, although, I mean, when he appeared on that horrible thing with Mariana Spring, I mean, you can see, but Neil is different. We're yet to hear Neil talk in detail about his "How I Left the World of Woo" story, like Brent has done. But I look forward to that, Neil. So please do enlighten us. But he came back with Brent Lee to do this, some dare call it conspiracy podcast, which was it used to be on YouTube. It's now elsewhere. And to approach the media and say, look, I was a conspiracy theorist. I've now changed my mind. And in doing so, he one of the things he did was he ended up doing an interview with this guy called Skeptic of the North, who's this bloke here. I'll just show him to you. This is Skeptic of the North. Data. He's got data in his banner. This chap here. That's sort of what he looks like. And he did an interview with Brent. Where is it here? Here we are. Ex-conspiracy. At this point, I play a very brief clip of Skeptic of the North interviewing Brent Lee. He's called Skeptic of the North, I assume, because he's from Northern Ireland. And there's Brent. So he did this interview with Brent Lee. and he talks about the journey into conspiracy, hip-hop role-playing, government distrust, JFK, Illuminati, and you can go to the various talking points if you want. I watched the whole thing, and I suppose I've ended up feeling quite sympathetic for both of them. I mean, I am generally, I suppose, I'm a sympathetic person, and I often feel sympathetic for people. A lot of other people wouldn't, but I do. So when I started watching Skeptic of the North, what happened was, the thing is, Skeptic in the North is actually very similar to Brent. He used to be conspiratorially aware, and now he is, again, like Brent, post-conspiratorially aware. He himself has been converted. He has gone through a conversion process. He is born again as a scapper, rationalist, whatever kind of word you choose to use. He is that person now. And what he's done is he's actually created a course, a series of videos, which are designed to help others come out of that dark pit of conspiratorial, paranormal, woo-woo belief. People like me. Because as you know, I mean, I haven't done the same journey that Brent has. I haven't indeed. I mean, you see, there's several reasons why I think I haven't gone down the same rabbit. I haven't gone out of the same rabbit hole that Brent has. And one of those, I think, is, I've talked about this before, but, I don't think it occurred to Brent that when those things happened in 2016, Trump, Brexit, Corbyn, I don't think it occurred to Brent that maybe it's because the Illuminati don't have complete power, or their power is weakening. This is what happened. So that's our basic answer to a complicated question. I called it the 2016 effect. But Brent has other ideas, and I think there's another fundamental difference between Brent and myself, which I will go into, which is why I'm still a woo-woo and he is not. But anyway, so Mr. Skeptic of the North, Mr. Skeptic of the North with a Miles Johnson accent, has created a series of videos called How to Deconvert Conspiracy Theories. There are actually 4 of these. There are actually 6 of these videos, and we're going to watch all of them. Now, this I know is going to make a couple of people's eyebrows rise. I've started to talk like him now. Eyebrows rise, because well, you might think, well, hang on a minute, this is a breach of copyright. You can't claim fair use if you're going to show the entire video. And well, I am going to claim fair use on it, and I'm going to, with the proviso that the only reason I'm showing this entire video, which you're going to see, is because if I don't, I know exactly what I can almost write these comments myself. The comments that are going to appear underneath this video will be, Ben, why you only showed a small part of these deconversion videos because you wanted to straw man them. You just wanted to show us all the easy bits, didn't you? I bet those are the only bits you watched. You've edited it selectively to straw man this entire conversion course you say you've gone through. Because if I come through to the end of this course, and I am a changed man, it is a bit worrying. Oh, what the hell? All right, I'll come clean with you guys. I've watched them already, okay? And I am not ready. I am not ready to hang up my tinfoil hat. But you never know. I could watch them a second time. I might see something I didn't see in the first time. So we are going to watch all of these, all right? And I ask Mr. Skeptic of the North, I ask you, if you're watching, could you please just realize the only reason I've shown all of these videos is because I want to be honest here. I want to show my viewers that I'm honest. I don't want to have my viewers come up to me and saying, oh no, you're not being honest, Ben, you're editing them selectively. Because you and I both know that's what people do. People will twist any issue to try and make you look bad. So it is I mean, these videos, they are quite calm, and they're quite sort of like gentle. It's sort of gentle therapy. Like I say, it's not like the eye, it's not like the, having your eyelids ripped apart like in Clockwork Orange. It's more like the film Holy Smoke. I don't know if you've seen the film Holy Smoke, with Harvey Keitel and Kate Winslet. The first time I saw it, I didn't like it. I thought it was feminist propaganda. Second time I watched it, I thought it was great. It's brilliant. So it's a bit more like that. It's more like gentle persuasion without all the shagging. And I'm not going to end up wearing a red dress and makeup at the end of it. Okay, so here we go. You should be able to see this. I'll just double check. Yes, I have on screen. This is part one. It's called by Skeptic of the North, How to Deconvert Conspiracy Theorists, Epistemology. Here we go. I play the theme sequence to part one here. Any doubts yet, guys? Keep on watching if you dare. Familiar with some of these. Rational Wiki is the Skeptic's Wikipedia. SGU is a Skeptic. Well, it used to be a Skeptic radio show. It's more like a science radio show. Skeptic magazine, science-based medicine. I don't know so well. Miles Power, you may be familiar with. Yeah, Potholer 54. I haven't watched for ages, but I do know him. Dawn is more kind of like he's a left-wing kind of SJW Antifa type person. Cosmic Skeptic, I don't know. Charlie Veitch, Charlie Veitch, the conspiracy theorist who changed his mind. That's his article with Will Storr. Now he's an infamous character. Again, I was even back at the time. This is like 12 years ago now. I was actually one of the people appealing for calm when there was this lynch mob against him. At this point, Skeptic of the North just says if you try to convince people, it often has a backfiring effect, entrenching them even further, convince the other person is like a government shill or something, or just against them. Looks like Russell Brand, doesn't it? What was that last one there? Maybe no evidence for my beliefs, but at least I'm open-minded enough to ignore society. Well, I think that's unfair. It may apply to some people, but I think generally that's unfair. There's acupuncture there, which is used in the NHS. Right, well, I'm the one, when it comes to accusations of shillhood, I'm the one who suggested we have a tribunal. I mean, you can check out the videos and the articles I've written about. Distance of political misperceptions. That's a bit Orwellian, isn't it? But anyway, when I press K, that's it, that pauses. Skeptic of the North then quotes the authors he's just listed and said that the more you correct people, the more corrections there are, the more misconceptions tend to endure and deepen and harden. Well, I mean, I suppose some people just don't want to listen to corrections. I mean, Brent, I'll say more about Brent in there because Brent, by his own admission, is one of these people. I don't think I am. Otherwise, why would I argue with David Smith? Why would I argue with Steve Mumbling? Skeptic of the North says here that skeptic literature has a purpose, that is actually explaining why some things are wrong, but it falls short of understanding psychology and the fact that why people believe certain things that they believe and how you actually get them out of it. Skeptic literature can't do that. It's funny, I would say the same with people like David Smith and Steve Mumbling, with the skeptics. I think I'm the one being rational, but anyway. In this segment, Skeptic of the North explains that he has authority to talk about this because he used to be a conspiracy theorist, like Brent Lee, and now he's a kind of reformed character, although he was only in it for 7 to 8 months, he says. And he didn't go too far down the rabbit hole. He didn't believe every single thing. Well, you see, that's good. I mean, there are things I don't believe in. I don't believe the Earth is flat. I don't believe that Lewis Hamilton is Barack Obama's son. Things like that. I don't, there are areas even I won't go. So, yeah. Now, Skeptic of the North says he used to believe in the JFK assassination. Well, I believe that it was an inside job, and he got the idea from watching Oliver Stone's famous 1991 movie JFK. That wasn't bad, that film. It didn't go into quite all the details. It got some things wrong. In this particular scene, which I won't necessarily put commentary on every single pause, Skeptic of the North explains why he believes that the magic bullet theory is incorrect. Point out, I'm familiar with this piece of evidence. It has been circulating in the skeptosphere for a number of years. This was Gerald Posner's latest idea. The magic bullet theory. The bullet apparently came from behind, exited Kennedy's chest on the left, on the right, went round like that, and then went into Governor Connolly's left shoulder. Things like that. True, yes. It's true. When you look at it, there's no doubting that. It does actually prove, I think, without any doubt, that a bullet did come from behind the car when it hit Kennedy and Connolly. This doesn't necessarily. I mean, This doesn't necessarily mean it came from the school book depository. It could have come from the Dallas County Records Office, which was on Elm Street, which is slightly more behind. It could have come from there, but it didn't. That particular bullet is not a magic bullet. Yeah, I know. Point Skeptic of the North describes the fatal wound on Kennedy, that is the headshot, the back into the left shot, which he believes is not suspicious and is in line with the bullet that was fired from the window where Lee Harvey Oswald allegedly was. Well, it all came out in Oswald's trial, didn't it? Oh, no, it didn't, because he was killed 2 days later, yeah. I missed some bits of this, all right, so I'm not going to show every single bit, but I hope you'll admit, that was just the scene with Bill Hicks going back into the left, back into the left. Penn and Teller are actually quite funny, even though they're skeppers. Is that a skull? It looks more like looks like a melon to me. We could always look at the path reports, except, oh yes, the pathology reports were classified, weren't they? Do you remember I did that what was it? I did that review of the film Parkland about the coroner trying to get hold of he didn't want the body moved because it was a murder scene and stuff like this. No, Kennedy's body was taken away. The path reports were classified, so we don't know, do we? There was the U.S. Navy path report. There was all kinds of fusses about it. I mean, it would all be cleared up if all this was public, but it's not. That's not a skull. That is a melon, and it's sort of rolling slightly to one side on one frame, yeah. But then it goes back. I mean, well, that's again, it's not a melon, is it? Skeptic of the North introduces the subject of the 9/11 conspiracy theory. I think a lot of people, it is that for a lot of people. It was, I know that Brent talks a lot about it. At this point, Skeptic of the North explains how he at least partly believed originally the 9/11 conspiracy theory, and it was the usual thing. It was the convenience of it, the fact that the Americans wanted to get into various countries, George Bush, etc., etc. Yeah, he says he was 85% sure that the official story was not true. Pussy. I was 100% convinced. Here, Skeptic of the North refers to the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth and the other experts questioning the official theory. Well, not quite. I mean, they about Dr. Judy Wood and what she said and things like that. The Key Tam case. Well, they didn't fall. They turned to dust in midair. No explosives were used. It was a directed energy weapon. It's not an exercise. It doesn't sound there's any confusion there. I mean, they do have provisos for things like this by state. They do clarify, is this an exercise? No, this is not a drill. This is not a drill. They do things like that in all emergency situations where you have to do some kind of exercise. This was the case at the hospital. We did drills at the hospital for various things. Not really a blessing in disguise. It was a blessing. I've read the entire. I've read that entire document, the new Pearl Harbor document, and it doesn't actually. I think I know what he's going to say. He's going to say, well, it's only details of defense plans and things like this, and it is, but it's very, very clear that they want to change the formation of the troops. They want to put more in the South Seas near China. They want to put more in the Middle East, things like this. And they mention several nations of concern. Here, Skeptic of the North says that people like us, the conspiracy theorists, don't understand what it's like to believe all this evidence and then change our mind when confronted with new evidence. Well, I'm doing my best here, Skeptic of the North. That's what I'm doing. I mean, I don't, because I haven't. I don't agree that the evidence exists to debunk what you're talking about here, as with the Kennedy assassination. And look, I would never do that. I mean, as I said, when Charlie did his mea culpa all those years ago, 2011, he was on that stupid BBC documentary. Incidentally, I was asked to be in the follow-up series. They did a follow-up 3-part series. I was going to be in either the 771 or the UFO one. They asked me to be in that, and I said, no, thank you, or words to that effect. And when I saw it, I was very glad. I was one of the voices appealing for calm. Look, he's done a silly thing. Criticize him. For God's sake, don't threaten him. Don't say you're going to do harm to his wife and children or things like that, which people were doing. And I was one of the loudest voices appealing for calm at that moment. The same goes for you, Skeptic of the North. I don't owe you. I don't feel any resentment to you. I'd always defend you if somebody attacked you on a personal level, as I do with Brent and Neil. Well, I'm open to any kind of information, Skeptic of the North. I'm open to that. I also, like yourself, I've looked at the other side of the story, and that's an important point. So I'm already familiar with a lot of skeptic arguments, and I think that is a very important point. I'll come back to that. Point out that changes of minds actually do often happen very slowly. They happen. There is a kind of, like, what's the word? There is a kind of Susan Blackmore talks about this because she went from being a woo-woo to being a skeptic. You get little doubts and you put them in the back of your head. It doesn't affect you straight away. I mean, I'm not talking from experience. I've not started this process yet. And then it builds up bit by bit. Then suddenly you could just have some kind of, wake up one morning and realize you were wrong all along. That's the thing. You wake up, it's not the kind of Paulian conversion where you just, you're a diehard and the next day you're suddenly, wow, I'm a skeptic now. That's extremely rare. It doesn't often happen in people's reasoning, in a person's reasoning system.
Skeptic of the North says that one of the catalysts that changed his mind was one day when he met and had a conversation with a young Earth creationist.
That's true, actually, and they believe things like dinosaurs were in the Bible, and there's like hints about them and things like that.
Yeah, Skeptic of the North ponders on the phenomenon of talking to completely normal people with completely bizarre beliefs.
That's it. I talk to completely bizarre people with normal viewpoints all the time. But yeah, it's probably a good idea to do that. I think it's always worthwhile doing that. Yeah.
In this scene, Skeptic of the North asks the young Earth creationists, "Why do you believe what you do when it goes against all the evidence?" And the young Earth creationists replied with what Skeptic of the North believes is false reasoning, and sort of crowbarred kind of theories and strange ways of dealing with the evidence, which he thinks parallels the 9/11 issue.
Well, funny enough, this was Charles Darwin's own point. He called it his missing link. He knew very well that his theory was incomplete. So that is a fair point, transitional fossils. All right, now I'm going to pause for a second to say that I'm not a young Earth creationist at all, but there are issues to do with evolution. There are issues connected to evolution, and I've made a video about it, and this is it. John Lennox in Oxford. So just watch that one, and just watch that, okay? And I go into more details there. But there are problems with evolution. Not that I don't believe the Earth's 5,000 years old or anything like that. I believe the Earth is probably billions of years old. The universe is even older, and I go into details there. So it's important, I think, and I don't know if Skeptic in the North actually is going to make this point, but it's important to distinguish between the sort of Bible-bashing young Earth creationists and their own pseudoscientific ideas, and those more serious questioners of evolution. That's interesting because I'm now going through. Hang on, put that there. I'm now remembering all the points made in that conversation with the young Earth creationists, and how many of them apply to me. I think the conspiracy of atheists. Well, maybe that one there is well, certainly not an equivalent in form, but maybe equivalent in role within myself. But I'll go into that in more detail. Very important. That's a very important question. He's quite right to ask that. Well, I used to, not anymore. I must just pause here for a second. David Smith. David Smith, I know you're watching. I will say more. I'll probably say more about this in the comments reply video. But I'm really beginning to. I think I'm beginning to understand you a lot better now. The reason I understood you is because I watched some of the line with Matt Dillahunty, the actual one that you linked me to, and it's interesting because if I recall correctly, you were saying, yes, Ben, I know you talk about these skeptics and you watch this skeptic video and you analyze this skeptic thing and you read this skeptic book, but you haven't yet called into the line and argued and debated with Matt Dillahunty. That's the ultimate test. That is if you can debate with Matt Dillahunty on that program, that is the world heavyweight boxing championship belt you win. It's the sine qua non ultimate challenge. And I think this is the point you made. You were saying, well, why don't you do this? This is the pen I said you were putting me in. You were putting me in this pen where this would fulfill your requirements, what you stipulate as the test that every woo-woo needs to go through to test, to show that they've got what it takes to win their spurs. And I asked, why within this pen is it correct? Why are the things outside the pen not correct? And we sort of began a conversation about that. We never really finished it. The thing is, when I started watching the program, I was really astonished. I was actually astonished. See, Matt Dillahunty, I think, is normally quite a reasonable person, but this program he's doing now has changed. It's changed. It's not a debate. Right, a debate is a competition between different ideas on the playing field of logic and reason, with which both players obey those rules. So if I was to say 2 + 2 = 4, and you were to say 2 + 2 = 5, we could test that hypothesis, agree and disagree, to the rules of logic which we both agree to cooperate with. What Matt Dillahunty is saying is essentially, if someone phones in and says 2 + 2 = 4, he says, shut the fuck up, 2 + 2 = 5, be quiet, don't say another word, answer this question, and things like this. All right, and he's literally that rude. He swears, he shouts, he tells people to shut up, and he does it for the entertainment of his audience. That is not a debate. That is a dog pile. That is pseudo-intellectual bullying. And I know why he does it, because I know so many others that do it as well, on all sides of the debate. I used to get this on Skeptic forums in the 90s when I joined them. So I'll say more about it. I'm going to say more about this in the comments reply video, but I just that I think is an important issue that we have to address. And this is why I do wonder what your epistemology is and whether you even understand what a real rational debate is. And I hope maybe you and I could have a discussion where we can clarify that. But what Matt was doing on that program was not a debate. It was not a rational debate at all. People were coming onto the show, probably filtered by his receptionist, the guy who answered the phone, to make sure they were sensitive and soft people, so that Matt could then, find it easier to put them down. There's this guy kept apologizing. Sorry, kept apologizing. I think that person was chosen to be on the show deliberately. I don't think they'd have me on there, because I would shout back at him and I'd swear back at him, and Matt would just cut the line. So if you really think that is the purest and strongest skeptic versus believer debate, I think you perhaps don't understand what you're talking. No disrespect, I don't think you really understand what a debate is. Let's continue. That was a slight aside. All right. Oh yes, we're going to go to. I'm right. I think I'll just stop sharing screen, because I don't. I think you can just, all you need is the audio really for this. But there we go. Yes, it's true. Hang on. Yeah, this bit here. Studies into scientific agreement on human-caused global warming, 100%, 97, 97, 91, 93, 97. So it's an overwhelming majority. There we go. Yeah, and and I suppose you believe that this scientific consensus has come about by a completely free and completely politically neutral intellectual landscape, and a rational environment in which science draws these perfect circles of of empiricism and reality, and the political forces have absolutely no bearing on this, and that anyone who says something that it may not be true, whether it's true or not, it's not what the others think, is not going to have their career ruined. Is that what you believe? Because that's not the case. So let's carry on. I did know that. If it did, I would, but I don't. I'll say more about this later. But that saying, well, all these scientists say one thing, so it must be true. It implies, because you're not a scientist, you're not an expert. You're not an expert, so you just have to accept that scientific consensus among the experts, without realizing that they may have come about their decision to state what they do through concerns, for example, how they're going to bloody pay the rent if they say otherwise. You see what I mean? And a lot of these scientific consensi, to use the correct plural, because it is a Latin word, they stand tall and firm, and their feet rest on a mountain of broken careers. I wouldn't debunk someone by saying, "Oh, you're just a Marxist." I wouldn't do that. I've done an entire video about this. It was the heat wave. Do you remember? Well, I've just explained why that I am dubious about it. Yeah. Here, Skeptic of the North says that if we can't agree on epistemology, that is the rules of what defines reality, then we're not going to come to any agreement. That's true, and indeed, that's kind of what I said to David Smith. We are. I mean, we have to agree on what things mean. I mean, David and I even didn't define certain things, like the word equality, for example. We had completely different definitions of. If you remember our debate in the last comments reply video, that I think, is inevitable. I mean, there's no such thing as a person without bias. People who say they have, I'm suspicious of people who say, "Well, I'm different. I don't have a bias." You see, I don't have a bias. I've decided to continue to show you I thought we could just do this audio only. it might relieve some of the copyright issues I'm delving into, but I think it's better if you can see it. Yeah, and that includes scientists in universities and academic institutions and laboratories. It's as much as we woo-woos are biased, and we have it's these peer-reviewed scientists, they also do. These things are universal amongst us, and no one is more affected by these fallacies than people who believe they're not affected by the fallacies. Yeah, that's true. That's fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I was already a conspiracy theorist when 9/11 happened. I was already reading David Icke by then. I was into space conspiracies years earlier. I was getting into UFOs. So yeah.
Skeptic of the North says how that this process can only lead to the delegitimization of what he calls respectable journalism, science, and reputable sources.
Well, is it all the fault of people and their biases, or is it because of the conduct of those institutions you've just listed? Reputable journalism. I mean, they have how reputable do they deserve their reputation? That's the question I want to ask you. Or maybe their own misconduct has led them to cause people to doubt them. Not because those people are naturally doubtful and naturally conspiracy theorists, but because of the reputation, the reputable, that is the disreputable nature of those journalists. The fact they lie so much. If people are going to keep telling you lies and lies and lies all the time, and then and then people say, "But I don't believe you." Say, what? But we're reputable journalists. Why won't you believe us? There must be something wrong with you. Is that really fair, Skeptic of the North?
Skeptic of the North says, well, if there's reason to doubt these official stories and embrace alternative views, why aren't they getting any attention in the mainstream?
I almost did that spitting out meme, didn't I, with the drinking? Oh, why is the BBC not covering this? Why is CNN? Oh dear. I'll let him carry on.
Skeptic of the North asks, if global warming is such a massive hoax, how come Greta Thunberg is always on TV? How dare you?
She is a disturbed young woman who is being used. That's why.
And the same applies to George Bush. Why is he not in handcuffs right now?
Oh dear. I could talk for half an hour about that one point, about the way society works, the way people groupthink works, the way established norms, myths, without the negative connotation of the word myths. Oh God, I miss Ian R. Crane. He could explain it so much better than I could.
Evolution isn't true.
Oh, now there's the Village of the Damned, the Midwich Cuckoos. That's a good film if you've not seen that before. It's about alien babies and things like that. They are by people like me, and how you used to.
Will lead inevitably to the point where mainstream media simply cannot be trusted.
What can I say except yes, that's it. I love that episode of The Simpsons where that's actually the episode where Homer he's following the Freemasons, the stone cutters, Freemasons, Masons cut stone cutters, That's a very good episode. PJW, yeah. If you're rich, then watch out, because Jeremy Corbyn is coming for your house. Imagine my shock. Vehement one-sided polemics. Oh, trust the science. Trust the science. Oh, everyone thinks that's a racist, and we've got loads of people in the studio to tell us that. Homogeneous means all thinking the same, all the same. I think it's homogenous, like homogenous milk, where all the cream's mixed up with the whey and stuff like that. Yeah, but what about it's exactly the same in the mainstream. We have people who will just simply believe what's said about things, trust the science. This prevents you from catching this disease. People who won't have this medical treatment, well, they're the ones who ruin it for everyone else. We wouldn't have these lockdowns if it wasn't for people refusing this, medical treatment, and not even all of them. Or economic financial validation. If you're in university, you've got rent to pay, and you're a scientist. I mean, you could tell the truth if you find out that something is real, and you could just say, "Well, I'll say the truth," and then everyone else will simply believe me, and the entire paradigm will change. Or you could just be more realistic and realize that's not how ideas change. That's not how paradigms shift at all. Now, you know what these are. These are just people who believe in the 17th letter of the alphabet, which we can't say on YouTube. I can believe that. I've not read this book, but that doesn't surprise me at all. What George Orwell called black-white. Yes, you believe things that are even contradictions. Yeah, that's kind of what the mainstream media is like. That's kind of what the mainstream media certainly makes me feel. That's absolutely true. Yeah, that's true. I mean, Adam Curtis put it similarly, he said that the world is increasingly comprehensive. I can't remember the exact word. The world is becoming increasingly comprehensive. Crises come and go like waves of a fever, and all people can do is say, "Oh dear." It's a good phrase from one. I think it was it Bitter Lake? It was one of Adam Curtis's documentaries.
Skeptic of the North says that the aim of the series is not to debunk individual conspiracy theories, although he does do that, but to try and encourage conspiracy theorists to work out exactly how they arrived at their belief.
That's fair enough. I'm willing to go along for that. But so far, all the epistemological problems that Skeptic of the North has outlined apply just as much, if not more so, to the mainstream. Correct. Yeah, that's doubtless. But I found that in my own life, though, with people. It's not just skeptic. By the way, Sam Harris is getting into UFOs. I should let you know. I think it's Dawkins. Dawkins, they always put him up against these straw man figures. I mean, I'm not going to rant about Dawkins now, but he's a guy who just plays for the camera. He's essentially a character, you know. Look at him poning this young Earth creationist, etc. But then he does his debate with Alistair McGrath, and that never gets into his he only shows brief clips of that. The movie The Goalposts, do you remember that from my Skeptic talk? Right, on to part 2, I think. Okay, my friends, we're back. Courage, my friends, courage. Do you still believe? Do not let these satanic words come into your ear. Do not let them in. Do not let them breathe Iago style into your brain and whisper all these lies and these deceptions from the devil. We will still believe. We will still continue to follow the path of righteous conspiratorial belief. So, on to part 2. This is how to deconvert a conspiracy theorist, part 2, demarcation. Right, I am going to show you the screen. I mean, I was thinking of saying, well, I'll only play the audio to get around some of the possible copyright issues I'm going to face over this video. I've already explained why I am showing the entire this series of videos in their entirety rather than highlights and brief clips and things like that. But I thought if I just play the audio, I bet somebody will make the same accusation and say that this is not a true assessment of the issue. So I'm going to try. I'm doing this to be honest. This is not an attempt to steal copyright from Skeptic of the North. This is an attempt to present his case as honestly as I can. So how to convert you can see that? You should be able to. Right, how to deconvert conspiracy theories. Demarcation, here we go. As I said, you're familiar with the last one because it's in my Skeptic talk. Hoofnagel. That's a good name, sorry.
So to begin with, he's going to talk about the tendency to invoke a conspiracy.
Well, that's kind of self-explanatory, really, isn't it? Okay, this is not me, I should point out, okay? Because though I do sometimes say people, I say it more politely, but I do sometimes say, their conspiracies do happen, don't they? And the conspiracy, such as Watergate, Woodward and Bernstein's article that was published. It was actually several months before it became like mainstream. Woodward and Bernstein's expose of the Watergate Hotel about the break-in at the office, etc. But until that went mainstream, it was a conspiracy theory, every bit as much as what I say is. I mean, it's very important, I'd say, to just Google this. I'll just show you right here. This is just a test. You should still be able to see this. I know. There we go. Conspiracy theories proven true. Right. 12 conspiracy theories that turned out to be true. Is this the first hit you get? Oops. No. Here we go. Right. The Dead Baby Project. Okay. I'm familiar with some of these. Prohibition. The government poisoned alcohol. First lady who ran the country. Yeah, that's interesting. Government mind control. Yeah, MK Ultra. All right, forget that one. John Lennon. Yes, John Lennon was being watched by the FBI. The government is spying on you. Big tobacco. Yeah, there's a big cover-up over that. Fake Gulf of Tonkin incident. Well based. There's an alien alive somewhere in the southwest. Oh, that's a joke, I think. Canada trying to develop a gaydar. A way to detect homosexuality in federal employees. Right, obviously, these days they try to keep you out if you're not gay, but yeah, the Illuminati in the government. There's lots of others. There's there's the what's the word? There's there's the various things done by various governments in South America, for example, who are supposed to protect the rainforests, and they allow illegal mining, things like that. There's the Tuskegee experiments, which was live human experimentation of deadly disease. I mean, there's a whole list of things. I mentioned Watergate. That was a conspiracy. The Watergate scandal was a conspiracy theory. It was, because they literally, Woodward and Bernstein says that there's a conspiracy going on. People, well, like I said, it actually took a few months to gain traction. And let's carry on. Let's carry on here. Again, I would be more polite about this, but it's an important point that the term conspiracy theory emerged after the Warren Commission, going back to the Kennedy assassination, to describe people who didn't believe its findings, that Oswald acted alone. The term didn't exist before 1964. Ah, yes, the baby incubator. Oh, the drama student who's the daughter of. Oh, he's going to explain anyway. Okay, yeah, the drama student who's the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador. Yeah, who told this horror story to get people behind the invasion of Kuwait. Yeah, I can't disagree with it. Not entirely. I mean, you see, I don't think there was a conspiracy to bring down Boris Johnson. I mean, there was partly because obviously all the government break their own rules when it came to the lockdown, didn't they? It's just Boris should have realised, that he had to be whiter than white because he was an anti-establishment figure. But really, at the end of the day, he only has himself to blame for that. And contrarianism is what basically Matt Dillahunty does. I've already been through that, and I wouldn't use that rhetoric. And we've already been through that. Now those are both exaggerations and caricatures. Both those examples.
Skeptic of the North then says that we should be skeptical of all claims, not just those brought out by mainstream media.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm with you on that.
Skeptic of the North then says he wants to draw a distinction between real conspiracism and grand conspiracism.
I mean, I don't have time to show you that video in this particular project, but do go to his channel and do check that out. All right, do because I've watched most of the videos on his channel, and the introduction one is probably one of the most interesting. It's the first one he put up there.
And he gives some examples: science versus pseudoscience, medicine versus alternative medicine, and SETI versus ufology.
Oh, I've done an entire video about that, haven't I? I've done more than one video all about that, SETI and ufology, haven't I?
Here he says that a healthy skepticism towards authority is a good thing.
Ironically, Lisa is in The Simpsons is kind of the skeptic, isn't she? The skeptic of the family. Oh, ironically, there's even an episode where she reads Junior Skeptic magazine. It's made as a joke, but actually there really is something called the Junior Skeptic magazine, I found out.
However, this natural instinct to distrust authority, which is a good thing, can result in extremes in which fundamentalism and extremism can flourish.
I hope he's going to go into a little bit of a recap on what the difference is between grand conspiracism and real conspiracism is, because I think we do need to know that.
So where does this line between healthy skepticism of authority and grand conspiracism and extremism lie? And he begins to talk about Mick West.
Mick West! I knew he was going to come into this sooner or later. That's fair enough. By the way, Karl Popper was threatened by Ludwig Wittgenstein with a poker in 1946 at the Moral Sciences Club at Cambridge, Trinity College, Cambridge. Ludwig, of course, I'm on Wittgenstein's side, not because he was particularly right, but because he was a brother. He was a porter. He was a hospital porter. Ludwig Wittgenstein was a pharmacy porter at Guy's Hospital, so I'm always going to be on his side. Because that's tribalism, isn't it? Yeah, the clown's day off. A clown had a day off from the circus and dressed as a lizard and then swam in Loch Ness. Yeah, that I think is if someone is doing that to disprove a sighting of Nessie, that isn't they're doing something that is unfalsifiable and therefore is not not valid. It is a fallacy. A dragon not far from Loch Ness.
Skeptic of the North makes the point that if you say I've got a dragon living in my living room, but it can't be seen, it can't be smelt, it can't be detected on thermal imaging, you can't put anything on the floor because it hovers and it leaves no footprints, that's unfalsifiable. So it's essentially saying, well, trust me, bro, it's there. Why should you believe it? That's a standard skeptic methodology, a standard skeptic view of the world.
Yeah, that's fair enough, actually. In fact, I make that point in my Skeptic talk, that they say there's this burden of proof thing. You know, oh, you can't prove it's not true. No, 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 no. You know, and I know very well that is actually not the case. And indeed, I make that point. In fact, I think skeptics sometimes unfairly tar people on our side of the debate with that. I mean, even those who haven't made that point will be said, well, that's what you think. So that's a good point. He's another one who gets into contrarianism, by the way. I mean, he's passed away now, but he was actually a very entertaining speaker, but he wasn't a debater, he was a contrarian. So again, we go back into that, what I was saying to David Smith. The thing about the demarcation problem is that everybody thinks they're doing science. No one pops their head up and says, "Hi, my name's John and I'm a pseudoscientist." Well, you do get them at the Findorn community in Glastonbury. I don't mind being called that. I've been called worse things. But people essentially fool themselves into thinking they're being sensible, or they'll say things like, well, the CIA invented the term conspiracy theory to make people like me look ridiculous. Well, that's true. You can see this visual, but I'd explain. Mick West proposes a graph in which he lists all the various conspiracy theories on a scale of how crazy they are, how different they are from the normal position. Yeah, I think I'm somewhere probably 10.5 to 11 on that scale. Another factor in where each conspiracy is positioned is how difficult would it be to keep this hidden from the public. Right, now that the number of people involved, I mean, I don't have time to go into it now, but there was an article by this guy talking about, I can't remember his name. He's actually a researcher of statistics here in Oxford, who worked out how long various conspiracy theories could last based on simply the one metric of the number of people involved and length of time. Those are the only two factors: the length of time and number of people involved. It didn't take into account what I talked about, ideas of tacit collaboration based on human psychology. It's interesting. The UFO cover-up is really the largest. It covers up really. So there's people really low down on here in the level of global warming and big pharma and JFK who believe in some kind of UFO cover-up. That's very interesting. The Skeptic of the North points out that on the lower end of this graph of likelihood spectrum, you do find some conspiracy theories that are rational and might possibly be true. This reminds me a bit of the old inverted pyramid that I covered in another video. So, for example, the pharmaceutical industry, which is very profit motivated, there could be times, especially in the United States, where abuse takes place. There you are, see? He took the words right out of my mouth. Well, I just mentioned that, didn't I? Skeptic of the North mentions that the infamous Tuskegee syphilis experiment ran from 1932 to 1972. That's 40 whole years. It's an awfully long time, isn't it? That's 40 years. And it's just like, people know this happened for 40 years. And for 40 whole years, this experiment went on. And people just go, well, no, but I mean, when I say this about, when you say that about Big Pharma, you're wrong. They would never do that. This is why it's almost like what Skeptic of the North is saying now is disproving his own thesis, but I'll let him carry on. Here, Skeptic of the North does not deny that real medical abuse goes on, but then he says, well, because of that, people think that, well, what about the V word and how how it can be used as a weapon, or that a certain disease beginning with C, not the C word disease, but the other one, is covered up, either cures are covered up because it's too profitable. Not just that, there's more. I can't say that I can't discuss this on YouTube, but I have an opinion on this which is different to Skeptics of the North. Well, it's revealing about how these things happen, and therefore it's perfectly legitimate to speculate that other similar things might happen. If Tuskegee can happen, why shouldn't these things happen? I mean, Tuskegee wouldn't be downright. See, Tuskegee are the big pharma conspiracies from the sort of 0 to 3 level on here. But Tuskegee, I think, will probably go up to at least 5 or 6. I mean, fake shootings, like all it's. Anyway, let him carry on. Here, Skeptic of the North says that he says that it's one thing to point out that individual organisations have acted wrongfully over the years, but it's another thing entirely to claim that all these different organisations are working together with each other, collaborating or conspiring. Not assume, no, but to speculate on the possibility. We know what these proven conspiracy theories reveal is that it can happen. If it can happen in one place, it can happen in another. And if reason can be found to believe that an entirely separate example is going on, there's nothing wrong with saying so.
And here he points out, obviously, the bigger the conspiracy, the more conspiratorial collaborators you need. So, for example, if the veracity of evolution would require a huge number of conspirators in the world of science. Of course, there'd have to be more conspirators, but how many people conspired in the Manhattan Project? All right, I know there were spies. I know how many people conspired. You could get other examples of tacit groupthink. I've seen it in action in my hospital. And on the opposite end of the graph, you get into the good stuff, the extreme stuff.
Base.
So, for example, what David Icke says, the existence of shape-shifting reptilian overlords.
Yes, I do believe in that.
And UFOs, the existence of aliens, and the fact the government is covering it up.
Not the flat Earth. No, I do believe in the reptilians. By the way, when I say I believe in reptilians, I'm not using code for any kind of ethnic group among humanity before anyone says anything.
Skeptic of the North points out that although a lot of these things are considered fringe, even within the conspiracy sphere, some conspiracy theories have seen a resurgence in recent years. A good example is the flat Earth conspiracy.
Yeah, why are YouTube? YouTube actually said they were going to start censoring flat Earth videos. I mean, flat Earth is nonsense in my view, but it's completely harmless. I don't see the harm in it.
Here, Skeptic of the North posts a poll that claims that 7% of the adult population in the United States were not sure if the Earth was round, with 2% saying they were definitely certain the Earth was flat.
Good point. I mean, the whole world is not like Americans. Americans, I think, are more naive than most nationalities generally, I'd say.
Skeptic of the North says, people didn't just wake up and decide to become flat earthers. There's a process, a kind of radicalization process that's not unlike entry into a cult. Or, for example, the grooming of a political fanatic.
Well, I don't know, is Skeptic of the North, does he believe, if you're watching Skeptic of the North, whatever your name is, do you believe that that if I were to become a completely mainstream believer, all right, mask up, Bin Laden did 9/11, moon landings were real, 9/11 was, things like that, 9/11, I've already mentioned 9/11, but all the other things completely mainstream. Would I be with somebody without bias or belief? Would I be somebody who had reached the ultimate point of perfect rationality? That's an important question. I'm not just addressing him, I'm addressing anyone watching this, especially my skeptic viewers.
Many people who believe in the more radical ones at the far end on the right of the chart you can see now, they started out by believing some of the lower level ones first.
Over the past,
that may be true actually, because I think I started off with things like the moon landings, which I don't know where does that fit on the graph. There we are. No, the moon hoax is actually quite high, so I didn't actually start with these. See, I actually started here, around about there, the lower end of the moon hoax. And the UFO thing, I was a bit higher up on the UFO issue. It's the moon hoax and UFOs how I started off. That was my introduction into the world of conspiracy theories. It was before Brent's. It was like probably mid-90s that this happened, about 30 years ago. Then I started to look into other things, global warming, big pharma, etc. And then 9/11 came along, etc. JFK, fake shootings. So I started round about there. And I did work my way down a bit, as well as up. And of course, I still don't believe in the flat Earth. I believe in all these other things on this list, but not the flat Earth. I mean, it doesn't always go in one direction, like I just explained.
In this bit, all that happens is Skeptic of the North actually plays some video from another channel, which is all about flat Earth communities around the world, a bit like that film Beyond the Curve. I've debated flat Earths. I debated Mark Sargent. I've debated Eric Weiss. I've been invited to another flat Earth debate, a live one this time, for Truth Seekers Teesside. So I look forward to that. So he concludes here that if you believe all these other things that the government have lied to you about, well, why shouldn't they have lied to you about the shape of the Earth?
It's a good point. However, there's other reasons to believe the Earth is round. Oh yes, I did a debate with him. Yeah.
You might notice on the graph that 9/11 is a very broad line. It goes all the way from the lower end to the top end, and that's because there's no unifying theory. It tends to be a kind of catalyst that brings in all kinds of different ideas.
That's true, actually. It starts with like the Michael Meach a lie hop. They let it happen on purpose. It was still Bin Laden too. It was demons from the fifth dimension, things like that. Or 9/11 didn't happen at all, and the Twin Towers never existed. I know someone who believes that, believe it or not. Sorry, he's making the same point that I just have. Pearl Harbor was a lie hop. I've done an entire video about that on the anniversary. Here he points out the contradiction in lie hops that I also do, which is that the powers that be, and they're not just going to rely on things, sitting back, waiting for them to happen, and crossing their fingers. No way. If they're that evil, they will take an active role. Yeah, that's true. Mitchell and Webb, yeah, they're actually pretty good. They're quite funny. The skeptic stuff's quite fun. They're quite funny, even though they're skeptics. Is though that lie hop basically is a position that's indistinguishable from incompetence. That's true, actually. Never believe in a conspiracy when you can believe in a cock-up. Well, that's not true. I think skeptics and people who say that never really understand why one should always be chosen over the other, why one is more likely than the other. When it comes to lie hops, yes, it's more likely to be incompetence than they just order to stand down and let it happen. But of course, it's neither. In this segment, Skeptic of the North talks about Norman Mineta, the former US Secretary of Commerce, who very infamously gave testimony at the 9/11 Commission hearing, which he said that Dick Cheney kept saying that the plane was being reported heading towards Washington, D.C., and someone said, we're going to shoot it down, and Dick Cheney said, no, let it keep coming, and he says, well, do those orders still stand? Yes, have you heard anything to the contrary? It's a bit of an infamous conversation, but Skeptic of the North claims that we conspiracy theorists have misunderstood the context, and we've cherry-picked a small clip rather than listening to the whole interaction which he plays. I don't get that at all. I don't get it. I don't understand that point at all. Although it doesn't matter really, because I'm not a lie hop. I'm a my hop. Made it happen on purpose. And Skeptic of the North thinks the same applies to the new Pearl Harbor quote from the Project for a New American Century document. I've already talked about that because I have read that entire document. I've read the entire document, and I still think it sounds sinister. It is sort of inserted in there. The entire document called Strategies, Forces and Resources for a New American Century. It is basically just like it would be very much of interest to the military buff more than anyone else, because it gives a list of various strategic changes that could be done to the U.S. Armed Forces and reorganization, of the U.S. Armed Forces. But it's actually, I have fact checked it, and if you read the document, it's still I think in a very sinister context that is in there, even if it doesn't specifically go on to state and recommend a false flag attack. I mean, is he going to mention Operation Northwoods? Here, Skeptic of the North goes into some of the more so-called far-out ideas about 9/11, for example, the hologram theory, video fakery footage, no planes, etc. I don't think that's far-fetched if you study Dr. Judy Wood's work and the commentary that Andrew Johnson has done, and indeed his own research. That's not far-fetched at all. Speak of the convenient. Here he provides a very brief summary of Dr. Judy Wood's book, Where Did the Towers Go? Yeah, and she's right. It wasn't a laser. Don't get into that, please. That's what a lot of the thermite believers keep saying. A laser, I should point out, is basically electromagnetic. It's light, basically. Light amplification, stimulated emission of radiation. This is not ionizing. This is not This is not an electromagnetic effect that Dr. Judy's discovered. The Hutchison effect is something entirely different. It is a release of another kind of energy through interference. The Skeptic of the North at this point mentions that most people in 9/11 truth are thermite believers, and they think that people like me, who believe otherwise, like Dr. Judy Wood, are nut jobs. Oh, I've had people emailing me to say to hurl abuse and then blocking me. I've had that, yeah. Plane huggers, yeah. Here he gives a list of examples of exchanges between different factions within the 9/11 truth movement. Yeah, I've had that too. I've had that. You're discrediting the entire thing with this crazy laser beams from space thing. I've had that, a lot of that. When it comes to other things, I've had when I was in the 9/11 truth group in Oxford, the guy who ran it said, "Ben, don't mention UFOs. It makes us look stupid. It makes us look crazy." And then we had Bryce Zabel coming out in 2011 saying, was it 9/11 truth and UFO shouldn't mix because we should, ufologists shouldn't mention 9/11 truth for the very, very same reason. Here, Skeptic of the North talks about the flaws in the thermite believers theory. They managed to rig these buildings with explosives under the noses of all the secretaries and the managers, etc. And then when the planes hit the building, they were burning for a couple of hours, and they set these explosives all off perfectly in synchronization, so the building neatly collapsed, etc. Well, I agree with that, yeah. And this is all because the 9/11 theory itself is crazy. There's just disinformation in everywhere. Oh God, that's what they want you to think. That's what the whole thermite things came out. That's the whole purpose of it, was to make people think, well, hang on a minute, this is nuts. Therefore, the mainstream must be real. That was the whole purpose of it. Signs. Has anyone seen Signs? That's from the film Signs. It's quite a movie if you've not seen it.
Here, Skeptic of the North talks about the popular image of the conspiracy theorist, corkboard and ribbons, tinfoil hat, etc., and how this is a stereotype propagated by the mainstream media.
Not me. That looks more like Miles than me. Thank goodness I'm bald. Oh, Edge Media. Nostalgia.
Here, Skeptic of the North addresses the backslappers, although he himself would not use that terminology. The people who are always accusing everyone else of being disinfo shills, agents working for the government, etc.
I never actually said that about most of the thermite believers. I thought most of them were just going along with it because that's just kind of like, it was the in thing, and some people I thought who were dishonest were. I mean, Andrew Johnson has covered this in great detail, the disinformation side of things, but most people were just going along with that.
Here, Skeptic of the North addresses real examples of COINTELPRO and things like that, where conspiracy groups were actually infiltrated. That has happened.
Not the Russians again. That's actually. Well, I don't agree with the examples he's just given. I think he's going to address the thing that Adam Curtis did.
At this point, Skeptic of the North outlines the the favourite backslapper line, the Mark Pilkington stuff. UFOs were psyop to cover up secret technology and stuff like that, which false in my view, but it's a very interesting thing to study.
Majestic 12, yeah. Well, they were. No.
Skeptic of the North expands on that issue, talking about the Benowitz affair, Richard Doty, Edward Snowden, and the art of deception, a PowerPoint, and things like that. Which I've addressed this many times on this channel, and I totally disagree.
Kind of. I mean, we don't know. It is simply a PowerPoint file. That's all it is. There were obviously no recordings of the actual lecture, and indeed. Obviously, no transcripts because it's classified. Yeah. Right. Okay. Now, regular viewers are going to know exactly where I'm going to go with this because I've made this point many, many times before. I'm just going to get some notes if I can. Okay. I don't know. No, I can't get any notes. All right. Listen. What Skeptic of the North has just explained here is actually not very original. In fact, it's a very fashionable idea at the moment. The idea that basically UFOs are some kind of engineered neo-mythology designed to launder more down-to-earth secrets, alien, spy planes, experimental spy planes, and things like that. But it's not plausible. I believe there is a double bluff going on, not the one that Skeptic of the North was saying. It's if you've got to really look at the results. I mean, look at the results of it. I mean, you're drawing attention towards something. You're drawing people's attention towards something with the ultimate objective of deflecting it away, which is an extremely risky gambit indeed. And indeed, it hasn't worked. I mean, look at Area 51. Area 51 was a secret base that no one ever talked about. And today you can go to Las Vegas and get on a tourist bus and go there. I'm hoping to do that myself soon. You should go to Area 51 on the tourist trail at Las Vegas. They have books on it in the Tourist Information Center. And people from all over the world go on this bus to visit Area 51, including people who don't believe in aliens and are only interested in military aviation. It's like two bank robbers. Right? They rob a bank. One of them goes into the woods, buries it under a tree, and just goes away and doesn't tell. He makes a note of where it is, keeps it secret, and doesn't tell anyone. The other burglar, he puts on like a striped jersey and a cloth cap and a face mask and carries a bag and carries a bag that marks swag. and he jumps up and down on top of the place where he's buried his stash of money. And every time a police car drives past, he says, "Excuse me, Mr. Policeman, just to let you know, there's no stolen cash buried here, just unicorn bones, okay?" Which of those two stashes is going to be found first? Which of the two burglars is going to be caught, the bank robbers is going to be caught first? So I do think there's a double bluff. I think, and Skeptic in the North essentially has been taken in. I think one of the jobs of Doty was to suppress this. Paul Benowitz, in the end of the day, was the one who was right when he said to Doty apparently made a confession of the truth. And it's actually interesting that the word confession, it's never actually used. You never hear claim. You always, when a skeptic or someone comes along debunking a previous UFO theory, you never hear the word claim, do you? You just hear the word revelation, confession, things like that. Exposure. A confession is a claim too, though. And it's ironic, that in the end, it was actually Doty who was right when Paul Benowitz said, no, it was all a counterintelligence operation. We just wanted to make you believe in UFOs. And he said, Paul, you don't have to lie to me. I know it was aliens. And it was Doty in the end who I believe was right. That's anyway. I mean, that's kind of what I've just said is kind of superfluous because regular viewers know exactly what I think about this. Oh, I've totally gone off this guy because his view on the C word, he was more than mainstream. I mean, he was saying, people who break lockdown rules should be, community guidelines. I can't believe it. He'd say that. But anyway, that's an aside. Are you kidding? Are you kidding? That's you are protesting the ultimate crime of the administration. What's he talking about? Alternatively, though, if you wanted to cover up the Kennedy assassination, what better way than to deliberately leak that material, pretending it's the opposite of what you want to do? It's a double bluff, just like with the UFOs. Mm-hmm. Oh, look, I mean, the idea there's an idea even within the conspiracy sphere. We get this all the time. Don't look at subject A; it's a distraction from subject B. And I get called. I get people attacking me for even mentioning UFOs for that reason. UFOs are subject A. There's a distraction from subject B. Then you say, right, okay, I'll concentrate on subject B. Then someone else will come along and say, subject B, no, leave it alone. It's a distraction from subject C. All right, I'll move on to subject C then. You start looking at subject C, and there's no, look, subject C is a distraction from subject A, and you go around in circles like that. Yeah, I accept. This has given me food for thought. Yeah, it does. Oh, God, I'm going to have to review this now, aren't I? I'm going to have to bloody review it. Oh, I think Tales from the Rabbit Hole 32. I think I've seen this. Michael Sherman's another one on the fence, though, isn't he? All right. Okay, it's the end of part 2. So are we ready for part 3, ladies and gentlemen? Are you feeling any wavering yet? Are you becoming uncertain? Are you on the fence? Are you being softened up for the ultimate recruitment? We shall see. Okay, guys, it's part 3. It's part 3 of this deconversion therapy course by Skeptic of the North on YouTube. And this one is called Experts. So here we go. So here Skeptic of the North says that we conspiracy theorists often say we've got experts to give our wacky theories a veneer of credibility. Just a veneer? Well, I've got a feeling that maybe some of the younger members of my family actually feel that way about me. I am the boomer uncle or father. Well, actually, my daughter's a lot more open-minded as she's got older, but I think I was that to her. Any of that pop up because it wasn't on for long enough, and I can't be bothered to pause it. Skeptic of the North says that the use of experts in false theories is because they're experts, we can just believe what they say without question. That's an exaggeration, and this entire this entire segment is going to be an exaggeration, but I'll let him carry on. Skeptics do that too, though. It's more complicated than that, and more nuanced, but the answer to those things is basically yes. I mean, these experts who are on our side in the conspiracy sphere who get banned, we can think of many examples. Are they really just saying things that the powers that be don't want you to hear, or are they just talking rubbish? Not necessarily. It could be that they're just full of shit and etc. But it may be that, though. It may actually be that they have gone against the mainstream. They have gone against the social and scientific norm, and therefore are being excluded. I mean, we know. I mean, a good yardstick, a good way of measuring this, a good I think qualification would be, were they previously, or have they always been full of shit, or have they just suddenly started talking shit? For example, David Bellamy. David Bellamy was removed from the scientific mainstream. He was castigated, he was cast out for questioning the climate change official narrative. Yet until that moment, he was not regarded as full of shit. He was respected for his, not just for his science, but for his activism, for his commitment to conservationism. It's like, so that's, I think, is an important test that maybe this chap, whatever his name is, Skeptic of the North, really needs to think about. Good, yes, yeah, definitely. There are experts who don't support the science. They don't support. That's right. They don't support evolution, like I explained in my John Lennox video. It's not lasers. I'm not going into that again.
At this point, Skeptic in the North asks, somewhat rhetorically, are they all being suppressed? Because if not, how can we tell who is and who isn't?
Well, I've just given you an example of a method you can use.
And he says here, the woo-woos don't have a problem with scientific conclusions so long as those conclusions don't conflict with a core belief they have.
Again, we come back to bias, which all of us suffer from. But I repeat my question. Is someone who believes every single mainstream thing in the world devoid of any pathology? I actually brought this up with Professor Karen Douglas when I met her, and she didn't really give me a very good answer.
Skeptic of the North says, well, we could take these things on a case-by-case basis, but I have to cover the entire subject as in a generalized way.
Yeah, I think that's true. You are doing that. I notice you are kind of summarizing this. I mean, otherwise these series of videos will be much longer, and there's nothing wrong with that, actually. But however, it doesn't mean that I need to mention it when you do actually generalize.
So Skeptic of the North says we should apply critical thinking skills to both sides of this debate.
True, actually, yeah. I mean, I believe that we should look in the mirror and have self-awareness. And he is going to come back to this point, and I will mention that, because like I said, I've watched these videos before.
Here, Skeptic of the North says we conspiracy theorists tend to inflate the number of experts that we have, and we tend to misapply them. So get them to comment on things that are unrelated to their own field of study.
Oh man, the UFO field is replete with this kind of criticism. Anyone who says something about UFOs that's pro ET, immediately, and it's not just the skeptics anymore, it's the backslappers. They'll just descend on these people. They'll descend on them like piranha fish after blood, or a school of sharks, and they'll dogpile them. This is why I think Ross Coulthart told David Grush before he went public, just deactivate your entire social media, remove all your previous internet profiles, remove anything that allows people in any way that people can contact you or comment on you. And I understand why, and I think he did the right thing. I'm familiar with this, yes. There's actually an entire film called Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed, which I don't have time to talk about in detail right now.
Here, Skeptic North claims that the creationists, the Darwin criticizers, have such a low bar of standards they'll just take anyone on and call them an expert.
Yeah. Or either that, or they have an awareness of some of the points that I've made about groupthink. I'm going to play this because I remember this is quite amusing.
Blatant lie. I can name 4, and he knows one of them. Professor Andy McIntosh, Professor Edgar Andrews, Dr. Steve Lloyd, and Mr. Paul Garner. All Christians, all young Earth creationists, and all reputable scientists, sir.
I'm watching this. I love it when the Dawkins gets triggered.
Well, okay, I know the first 2. I don't know the second 2. And all I can say is that we can't do it by numbers, but if you actually count up the numbers of scientists, you'll find it's a tiny, tiny minority. But never mind about counting numbers.
That was very calm and professional of him.
Just go and look at the evidence. It's overwhelmingly convincing. I'm pretty sure you've never looked at it.
Dawkins, you're getting socked in the head, come on. The very term climate deniers itself is a piece of rhetoric. I could just as easily say something like 2 + 2 4 deniers. 2 + 2 = 4 deniers, couldn't I? Or could say, up is up deniers. I could the word put in denier after everything immediately creates a kind of mental rhyme with Holocaust denier. That means, and then you can label, you can then hang them up on the peg with all the most evil and disreputable people in the world. It's so the very fact that somebody would use the term climate change denier. I mean, of course, it's quite common practice, so maybe Skeptic of the North shouldn't be blamed too much because it's just part of the normal parlance. I mean, George Monbiot always does it. Bloody, what's his name, that watermelon who lives here in Oxford? What's his name? Mark Linus, he always does it. It's yeah. Anyway, and what's more, I should point out every time one of these petitions goes around, the number of academics who doubt the official story grows smaller and smaller all the time, and it's not through persuasion. It's because they have their tenure cancelled. It's because they're dismissed. It's because they're disbarred or they're removed from professional associations. This happened to David Bellamy. No, it just doesn't. I think it just discredits the idea that everyone who opposes a certain idea just doesn't know what they're talking about. That's the purpose of these petitions. No, not necessarily, but I've just explained that.
Oh, it's on there.
Well, that doesn't mean he knows nothing about it. He understands scientific principles. He can read the literature. He probably has a better understanding of it than most people, even though it's not his special field. Brief clip. Let's hear the rest of it. Yeah, that's another example of the George Mineta statement. That was about 30 seconds. Let's hear the rest of it. What did he say next? No, it doesn't mean you can't trust them to say anything, but it does mean that they're going to have another motive other than empiricism. No, it's an observation of human society and how it works and how people behave when they're part of organizations. I'll say more about that actually later in this video. I wouldn't reject something for that reason alone, but it's still it's a factor in the equation.
Okay, at this point, Skeptic of the North says that you maybe you can't trust like a big pharma person or scientist because they receive funding from government or whatever, but then you go to your naturopath who also earns an awful lot of money, and I mean, of course there are people in the conspiracy sphere who are very, very rich. Oh, not many, but they exist.
Right, I think this is the video. David Smith sent me 4 videos to watch, of which I've only watched 3. The last one was about, the third one was about how big business funds woo-woo, and it makes some of the points. It makes some of the points that he's making now. I'll cover that in more detail in the next comments reply video. I do for my. I don't do for this, but I do for Panmo TV. But I do for my books, and I do for my regular job. It doesn't matter that it's transparent. And to use the analogy of the emperor having no clothes. He had no clothes. His clothes were transparent because they were non-existent. You know the story about everyone pretends he's got clothes on, but this little kid said, hang on, he's naked, he's got no clothes on, because the child hasn't been indoctrinated with the norms of society. It's non-existence is the most transparent thing of all.
And he says there are conspiracies the other way. So, for example, a lot of the a lot of this anti-big pharma propaganda is sponsored by natural medicine practitioners. A lot of the climate change is sponsored by the oil companies. There's that Merchants of Doubt thing, a lot of etc., etc. So he's saying that it cuts both ways, basically, when it comes to vested interests and deception in destroying a competitor.
Merchants of Doubt. I've done an entire video which reviews the film Merchants of Doubt, and it's actually not what he thinks it is. It's not, but there is a film called Merchants of Doubt, which I've reviewed.
Here, Skeptic of the North claims that if you're going to discredit things because they're funded, then that applies far more to the conspiracy side of the argument than to the skeptic side.
That's partly true because, of course, there isn't financial motivation on both sides, and indeed the backslappers are always going on about he's a circle jerker, he's a wackadoo. He's making money out there, but Linda Moultonhouse making money off this. She's braining cows with shovels to make money. Things like all that. The backslappers go on and on and on about the money made by people like Stephen Greer, etc., etc. It's just a money-making scam, right? That's true up to a point, but it's really not an argument because, of course, the backslappers make money, don't they? Praise the cash, mentioning no names. And so you can then reverse it and say, well, maybe there's a skeptic industry, you see, because, I mean, I've been to a skeptic conference. This guy might even have been there. I might have met him. TAM London. I went to TAM London. I want to go to QED, but they discontinued them, unfortunately. I'm a member of Oxford Skeptics in the Pub. TAM London was it was a very high budget conference that clearly was there to promote not just a principle, it was there to promote a principle, but it was there to promote people who had things to sell. There's nothing wrong with that. The Communist Party didn't take power in the night, did it? So So this is kind of like this. You could go down a spiral with these accusations and this idea that, well, things are a money-making scam, etc. And if you say that, well, I've got someone on the opposite side who's also making money. That's true. However, I do think there is distinct difference. There is something distinct, and I think, what's the word? That applies simply to one side or the other. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. I'm trying to think of some kind of long word to make myself look sophisticated. But it's something that is unique to one particular side of the debate and not unique to the other. And I'll go into that later, because I think there is something unique about the mainstream which the conspiracy sphere doesn't have, and vice versa. Yeah, who have other motives other than science for making that claim. Same goes for mainstream scientists, though, doesn't it? That's actually who I thought you were referring to. But yeah, I mean, the same goes for both sides of this debate. See, that could be said for both sides, you see.
Skeptic of the North says at this point, I haven't gone down a rabbit hole or been brainwashed by the liberal establishment. It's just, I don't take this stuff seriously because it's shit, quote unquote.
No, you've gone down a rabbit hole. You like Brent, you became a conspiracy theorist. You changed your mind when you were exposed to different evidence. All right? You've done that, and that's. I don't have a problem with that. People don't choose their beliefs. Brent didn't choose his. He didn't choose to become a conspiracy theorist. He didn't choose then afterwards to become a skeptic. I didn't choose to become what I am now, a woo-woo. I mean, I could choose. Well, I didn't choose that. I may end up becoming. It's possible I could go the same route as you have and become a skeptic. Now, in my case, I think it's unlikely. Less likely than it is for, say, Brent. And I'll say why perhaps in the summing up of this video. But it's not completely unfeasible. It is within possibility, even though I say it's very unlikely.
Skeptic of the North says at this point, it may not be everyone's fault that they believe in rubbish. It could be just the state of scientific education and journalism today.
That's a good point, actually. I don't know how many of you are big fans, as I am, of Charlie Brooker's Moments of Wonder and the various Kunk on Earth, Kunk on Shakespeare, etc. They're brilliant. They're brilliant shows. I mean, the character is brought to life so wonderfully by Diane Morgan, and it's written so well by Charlie Brooker. What inspired Brooker to create that was basically he was wanted to ridicule and parody dumbed down documentaries. He said, let's create an idea of a science program or a series of science programs, and let's make the presenter one of the most unintelligent and uninformed person imaginable. Hence the birth of the character Philomena Kunk. And if you've not seen them, they're just so funny. They're hilarious. So yeah, I mean, maybe he's got a point now.
At this point, Skeptic of the North brings on a fellow YouTuber, a friend of his, who has a YouTube channel on science literary, and starts talking about the scientific method and especially the importance of peer review.
I don't think it does. I don't think it serves as a bias filter. You can up to a point, but like I say, in a world where there are large numbers of people within an organization where there's pressure on them to think a certain way, even peer review won't eliminate that. It's just I'll go into this later at the end. But one of the things that has surprised me over the course of my life is the amount, depth, and complexity of deceit. And every time I think that I've reached the limit and that it can't go any further, something will happen. Someone will say something. Someone will commit some kind of, someone will commit an act which proves me wrong. Proves me wrong.
At this point, the guest presenter says that the safety debate about GMO organisms is over.
The debate is over. Mark Linus, the Oxford watermelon himself. I went to one of his talks. I actually reviewed it on this channel.
Now, at this point, a Skeptic of the North's guest presenter makes an interesting point. He says, well, appealing to experts is a kind of appeal to authority fallacy, but he gets round this. He gets around this by saying, no, the evidence is the authority, not the individual. It's a very interesting argument.
I dispute that because the overwhelming evidence that has forced the consensus is the authority, but it could be the other way around. The authority has forced the consensus, which has then created a biased assessment of the evidence, across the entire community, not just individual scientists or individual laboratory teams. I've known some of these people, though. I've known one of the world's top psychologists. I've known her so well, she kind of became my step-grandmother. And she's an evil, lying, mentally abusive. She committed on me a psychological abuse of a young person. Are you saying, I mean, I could go into more details about this, and I have done on other videos, but I knew this person so well. Like I said, she was virtually a member of my family, and what she did to me still haunts me to this day. She was one of these experts, and from her behavior about me, do you think she's going to be completely honest in her work?
At this point, he says, well, look, if you are going to abandon scientific consensus and don't hold it in respect for whatever reason, what's the alternative? What else do you have?
That's a good question. What is the alternative? I don't have a complete answer to that. I really don't.
Now, this guest presenter now comes on to 9/11 and talks about the various what he regards as pseudoscientific adjustments that said that the buildings collapsed due to some other method than the official story, and basically repeating what Skeptic of the North has already said.
Right, he's going to repeat the points made by Skeptic of the North, so I will forward wind this bit.
At this point, Skeptic of the North comes back into this video at the end of the guest presentation, and he says, look, scientists are still people, but the importance of peer review is vital, because it's testing evidence and not some kind of appointed authoritarian expert. That people, have biases because they have political, religious viewpoints, etc. That it makes them inclined to validate some viewpoints and some conclusions over others. But the scientific method is not like that. The scientific method essentially is something that draws perfect circles wherever you take it, and the individuals actually doing it it doesn't matter who's doing it, as long as you use the scientific method properly. That's what he's saying. The method itself thrives on falsifiability. It has no ego, and therefore it could be proved wrong about anything at any time.
That's why I disagree for the reasons I've explained. Peer review is not, it's not an immunity against that bias.
And here he says that skeptics are always saying this. He says, well, you might want something to be true, but however much you want it doesn't mean it is true. You have to accept that the evidence may show that it's not true.
James Randi, you must understand, these people, these woo-woos, these paranormal believers, they don't just want their beliefs to be true, they need them to be true. Of course, I believe the same about the skeptics.
Yeah, Skeptic of the North mentions a Nobel Prize-winning scientist who retracted her own paper because her results couldn't be reproduced.
That's, I suppose, is the ultimate, that's the ultimate, she's passed kind of, I suppose, the ultimate hurdle. Richard Dawkins gives an example of this in his book, where he talks about a man who celebrates the fact, after just one lecture, that his long-held belief is correct. I myself, if you remember, have changed my mind on a couple of things, including those aliens in Mexico. I really wanted them to be real, and it turns out they're not. What did I do? I didn't double down. I changed my position.
Now, Skeptic of the North says, well, that kind of intellectual integrity and honesty and courage is something that conspiracy theorists never do. And that's the difference between us and scientists like the person who retracted their paper.
I just have a Skeptic of the North. Misrepresentation. In my view, we haven't learned that, and he has not addressed the problems in that, the actual problems, the obstacles that the scientific method faces, caused by politics, economics, and, culture and psychology. Right, well, that's part 3 out of the way. This is going to be a long video, I know, but like I said, I think I need to do this. I need to unpick or do a deep dive into this entire series. Firstly, to show you that I'm being as honest as possible, and secondly, simply because, again, I want to avoid my own bias. So I'm kind of upholding a bit of the scientific method there. All right, guys, we are now on to part 4. And it's called How to Deconvert Conspiracy Theories Bias. This is part 4. There are 6 parts. Okay, so I'll just show it to you before we start. So here we go. There we go. All right. This is called bias. I hope you're going to say something original, because we've already kind of gone into that in the last one.
He's going to examine how confirmation bias manifests itself within conspiratorial thinking.
What about within skeptical thinking? Because I've covered that in detail in my channel. And indeed, I repeat what I said to you in the last one. And is the mainstream world completely devoid of that? If I had completely mainstream beliefs, will that mean that criticism could never be applied to me? I want to believe 9/11 was done by 19 guys with box cutters and other hardware tools. And I want to believe that the government has my best interests at heart and would never do anything to harm me. However imperfect and sometimes incompetent they are, they're generally good people. Therefore, I'll only look for the evidence that supports my conclusion, which is very easy because you can find it in all the newspapers. Conclusion reached. While refusing to speak to the skeptics, like I do, don't I? In fact, I blocked Steve Mumbling and David Smith straight away, didn't I? Yes. I swear they're going to claim that. There's now a long segment in which Skeptic and North simply reiterates the scientific method, that is to start with hypothesis and theory, investigation, falsification, and conclusion. That's fair enough. I've got nothing against that. There's always kind of like examples of that, like you know, there's visual tricks, like you think that's a certain color, and then it's shown otherwise that it's not. You know, optical illusions. That's fair enough. Sometimes things can seem one thing and they're not another. I mean, this is something that Ludwig Wittgenstein was very into. And being a hospital porter, pride and dignity, brother, you know, he was particularly good at that sort of thing. Yeah, evolution. Yeah, you can. Yes, this is a good point. I've seen things like this before as well, where you think there's something there that's not, or something forms a vague shape, and you think there's a more detailed shape. Yes. This is enough in the world of climate change. They are actually hiring lawyers to do various things. I don't know the details, but oh, and of course, another perfect example, John Mack. He had to hire a lawyer, not to promote his view, but to counter basically legal problems he was facing for coming to his conclusion about alien abduction. It was Danny Sheehan. But then, of course, the other side, the defense or prosecution, does exactly the same. Before Skeptical North becomes sarcastic and says, well, no one should obey my bulletproof logic. Some people do say that, you know, and they're not all skeptics. Of course, there's a perfect example. He's just shown a slide from a page from Snopes. Again, this is the fact checkers can be fact checked too. It's the fact checkers also come, you know, if you ever watch various people analyzing this, and they explain why some of the fact checkers are sometimes wrong. At this point, Skeptical North says, you know, we have a tendency to form social bonds with people who hold our beliefs. It's kind of tribalism. And I've made this point too many times, because I do that. That's fair enough. I mean, I try not to demonize people who don't hold my views. I mean, I don't demonize Skeptical North or Brent Lee. I don't demonize them. I try to be charitable to them. I think they made a mistake, but I've got nothing against them. But yeah, I do like hanging out with people who share my beliefs. That's why I get conference fever, isn't it? Here, Skeptical North makes the correct point that social media companies actually deliberately, you know, keep feeding you things that you already agree with. In a sense, your own algorithms sort of like promote things that you like and connect you with things that you would like. How long? This was made 3 years ago. I don't know when they started doing it, but they don't do that anymore. They do the opposite. They basically shadow ban things that you may like and feed you mainstream material instead. They used to do that. I remember thinking to myself, that's odd, you know, that this video came up. That's exactly what I wanted to see. And they even do it with spam, you know, and spammers still do it because they want to sell you something. You know, I get like spam sent to me that seems to fit my worldview. Well, you can't say that for me. I mean, I'm in the middle there of that diagram. I'm sort of right in the middle. I do engage with the other side, so that doesn't apply to me. The whole video is that. And I can't actually read this out on YouTube, but this person wants to stop something that's expressing an opinion, a cybersecurity journalist, and saying, well, the opinion is false because I say it is, and it needs to be stopped. So that's censorship. That's railing against the very thing, you know, and this is the very thing that Skeptics and North has warned us about. But this comes from the mainstream side. Do you see what I mean? Oh my God! Oh dear! He says it's a good thing. Is he saying it's a good thing that David was deleted from YouTube? Is he saying that if you Skeptic and North, if you're really championing these actions, you're contradicting yourself? And here he says, well, if someone changes their mind over something that's core to their identity, it's actually quite a newsworthy event. Charlie Veach, I know. That's true, actually. Yeah, I see what you mean. That's true. It doesn't mean that someone does something that is right, but it doesn't. It makes it extraordinarily difficult to go against that. In a sense, it's not been a massive problem for me because I've never been a skeptic. The hostility I get from being part of my in-group from the outside has always been there.
He talks about the process of changing your beliefs. You need to be psychologically ready and to face the consequences, the social consequences and things like that.
I mean, look at Kate Shemirani has been through this. She's now got her son on BBC, slagging her off. I mean, it is difficult if you move from one tribe to another. We are tribal people. We are tribal, and I can say, even though I've never experienced it myself, I can imagine what it'd be like. How would you people react if I suddenly became a skeptic, which I might do at the end of this video? What would you say about me? What would you think of me? Would you still be friends with me? I know a lot of you would not. Quite the opposite, in fact. You'd feel betrayed. I mean, it's not something that's very likely to happen, but it's just something to think about, isn't it? I mean, I don't think I'm the kind of person who would bite my tongue and put on the act of being a conspiracy paranormal believer when I wasn't, but I would feel uncomfortable, and I would approach such a situation with trepidation. I would.
A skeptic from the North makes a point that many skeptics have, that being a conspiracy theorist is anomaly hunting. So if something feels wrong, you go looking for anomalies.
Well, we search for evidence for our hypothesis, and indeed, if we're sensible, we examine the opposite as well. The scientific method, isn't it? Oh, not coincidence, please. An odd coincidence, yeah. But skeptics will use that argument about odd coincidences after there's been 50 of them, and they're extremely unlikely. Oh, dear. Now, if there are a number of anomalies that are detected in a particular thesis, that's an indication there is something wrong with the thesis. That especially it could indicate there is some kind of deceit with the people who've done the analysis of the thesis. I agree with that in that definition, indeed. It may be interesting to notice that some of the AI bots have actually had to have, essentially they've been lobotomized when it comes to certain subjects, because they have actually come to conclusions that conspiracy theorists would believe in. So therefore, they've been deliberately programmed not to think about them. Well, yeah. So even the ultimate logic machine, the computer, that has no consciousness and therefore is not capable of bias, has to have bias programmed into it. We're going to get into pareidolia now, isn't it? Saber-toothed tiger in the grass. If you think it is one and it's not, you're going to survive longer than the person who thinks it's not when it is. Therefore, you're going to pass on your genes to the next generation. So you evolve that, right? And what if you hear music coming in that rate? You hear music coming from that radio static, or a complete conversation in terms of voices. A skeptic could still say that's just coincidence. A skeptic technically, I mean, I don't think they ever would, because they realize it's stupid, could look at the beautiful mural inside the Sistine Chapel and say, Michelangelo, that's a random splash of paint. Michelangelo got angry one day and kicked his paint pots around the room, and he liked the pattern and left it like that. And someone came along and said, nice painting, Mike. And so Michelangelo thought, well, I'm not going to say otherwise, am I? Now, that, of course, is ridiculous, but a skeptic could say that hypothetically, and they could claim that. Well, you could win the lottery 5 weeks in a row. Again, the odds against that are 13 million to 1 to the power of 5. That's a number so huge it's impossible to imagine. Yet you could say that. You could actually claim that and be a skeptic. And the skeptic would go, well, it could be. There is nothing physically possible in this world that is so unlikely to happen that you can say, well, that can never happen. If you look at my book, Beyond Coincidence, it's worth watching. I mean, it's worth reading. I mean, you could say the guy who won the lottery was just a very lucky guy. Michelangelo was very lucky. He avoided all that work and creativity by kicking paint pots around. Until a skeptic is willing, pardon me, until the skeptics are willing to put a statistical ceiling above which they will stop saying things are coincidences, They have to declare a statistical ceiling, and they have to explain why it's there. And whenever something falls above it, they do not call it a coincidence anymore. Until they're willing to do this, I'm afraid I'm not interested in this theory about coincidence, because it's just a get out of jail free card. And I make this point in more detail in my Skeptic talk. Where's the cutoff point, skeptics? Until you establish one and say why, where it is and why, you can't use coincidence as an explanation.
Skeptic of the North explains how science can break through the problems caused by pareidolia.
Ludwig Wittgenstein again. Porter's dignity and Porter's pride, my brother. The rabbit duck.
He says it's important to realise when anomalies are insignificant rather than just simply random.
Oh yeah, you have to know the difference. That's right. I mean, that's fair enough. See, but the thing is, like I just said, what skeptics do is they take meaningful anomalies and they say that they're random. They accuse us of doing the opposite, of taking random anomalies and saying they're meaningful. Yeah, maybe that's true. Yeah. How do we know the difference between random and meaningful, and random and not random? Mainstream never does that, right? It's probably right, actually, that anomalies do appear in world-changing events. I mean, you could say, well, it's as Nick Pope, to give him his credit, makes this point, and he's right up to a point, because he said, well, people get, if I went out and got killed in a car crash and I was drunk, no one would say anything, but Diana does it, or her driver's drunk, and everyone thinks, oh, there's a conspiracy. But it's because Diana is such a powerful and public figure, so famous, so beloved, so hated, so renowned, that this conspiracy theory about her death has emerged. This is what he says. So you could say, well, that is kind of like, you could claim that, well, these anomalies in the story of Diana's death are a part of that process. Yet when you look at it into more detail, there are anomalies which I think are beyond random. Indeed, it's not just me. I was on duty when it happened. The Porters, we were phoned up, and someone, even before it was announced on the news, we were told to lower the hospital flag to half-mast. Even doctors were saying, why haven't they moved her from the tunnel? I was watching TV with trauma experts saying, why is she still in the tunnel? Why hasn't she been moved? Why is it taking so long to get her to hospital? Things like that. So I would say in the case of Diana, Princess Diana dying, there were meaningful anomalies in that particular case.
Now, Skeptic of the North brings up the umbrella man at the Kennedy assassination. It was always thought that he was some kind of a spotter or giving off a signal because he had a big black umbrella, or even there was a hidden gun within the umbrella itself. It turns out now he was a protester. The black umbrella was a symbol of political protest of some kind.
Yeah, we know, but this is the guy who's a royalist or something, and the black umbrella is a protest. I mean, I'll let him say it. Yeah, I mean, there was another story behind the black umbrella man, which I am aware of. But I don't think it's fair to say that because it can't be explained. I mean, maybe some people jump to conclusions. Indeed, some of them have. But I don't think we all do. There were the tramps. I mean, that's a side. But there were these tramps. One of them was Fred Chrisman, who in 1947 was involved in a UFO event. And because he may be lying, of course. He may just have come forward because, it's a cover story because too many people were asking questions about him. But no, I'm kidding. I actually do believe this guy's being genuine, and that was the real reason he had a black umbrella. And of course, black umbrellas have been seen in other protests, like in Hong Kong. More very recently, a couple of years ago, there was a big protest against the government there. And the protesters were carrying black umbrellas. And there was the courtroom invasion many years earlier here in Britain. But there was the lawful rebellion people who went in with black umbrellas into the courtroom. Yeah. Well, the thing is, Nixon has real reason to be paranoid, didn't he? It wasn't a random reason. There's an explanation behind it, which I do believe, despite joking.
Now, Skeptic of the North brings up something that's absolutely infamous within 9/11 research. Jane Stanley's gaffe. Now, this is a situation on the BBC where Jane Stanley was standing in New York doing a report and told the presenter in the studio that the Salomon Brothers building had collapsed. That's WTC7, and it's still standing behind her upright. And there's a theory going around that she was handed the wrong script because they'd already planned in advance for the building to be demolished, and they didn't know at the time. So there's always this kind of like concern that a lot of us have had that this was basically, as I said, the BBC, making an error. And of course, you can't just say, "Cut, we go again," as if it is like a kind of movie.
Well, they're not exactly going to show you the press release and the scripts, are they? They're not these documents aren't going to be seen. These are indicators. These are indicators that something has gone wrong in the information process. And what follows is basically a psychological damage control operation. We see the same thing with Roswell and the weather balloon story. A new story about a captured UFO was released by accident. Oh, they say, well, what are we going to do? I know, weather balloon story, and later on Project Mogul. It's done all the time. This is just disinformation to cover up past mistakes. So it's perfectly reasonable people would think that. Well, not exactly, but I mean, I know the other side of the building was more badly damaged, but it was still standing. When the collapse happened, everyone knew that it was going to be some kind of collapse. But when it happened, after they had got everyone out, it basically went down like a folding top hat. It says that the collapse apparently was not very surprising to those who were at the scene. Yeah, the building, it was obvious the building was going to suffer some kind of structural problem. We knew that, yeah, that's true. But it hadn't happened yet, had it? Imminent danger of collapsing, right. Slightly different from it has collapsed. Responding to conspiracy theorists. It was just a weather balloon, you know. No aliens. Started reporting there was a collapse zone and the building was going to collapse very soon in the future. I don't deny that. But Jane Stanley didn't say that, did she? Yeah, it might collapse or it was going to collapse. Yeah. Could fall. Right. Right. I'd be curious to see when this actual document was published. Is this a piece of backfilling put in to try and basically say, well, look, we said from the start that we weren't sure if it had collapsed or not. We were looking there and we were looking at the sky, but well, my eyesight's not very good and I couldn't see if there was a building there or not. So maybe it was still there and maybe it wasn't. I'd be curious to know that. And I wonder, is the person who wrote this actually on the scene, or are they actually in a studio? They can't actually see the building itself. Now Skeptic of the North brings up something that's very, very significant indeed. What you have instead is you have like a CNN report where there's a reporter standing there, very similar to how Jane Stanley stood there with the World Trade Center 7 behind him, giving a similar report. The thing is, you can see quite clearly that it is edited. You can see very, very clearly that it cuts away from the reporter at a very, very key moment in the middle of his talking, I think, to manipulate or to give a false impression of what he's actually saying. Do you notice how it cut away from him when he actually said the world is collapsing? Let's watch that bit again. Go back up slightly. 7 in the World Trade Center complex is on fire, and you can actually hear it. You can hear it. It doesn't just visually cut away. You hear a break in the soundtrack. Listen again. Now that one of the other buildings, building 7 in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is. It cuts away and you hear him say, and is either collapsing or has collapsed. Backfilling. It's backfilling. That was edited. I bet you that edit was made after people noticed the Jane Stanley mistake. It's behind her. You can see it. The Skeptic of the North says he doesn't have time to debunk every single anomaly in the 9/11 story, in the 9/11 conspiracy theories. This is just an example of the problems with anomaly hunting and an example of how it can lead you up the wrong track. All right, well, in terms of UFOs, as I've said, you have to. The skeptics have to be right every time with UFOs, but we believers only have to be right once. In this case, it's the mainstream media that's making shit up. Okay, A is perfectly reasonable. I think B is there's two problems with this, two fallacies. In fact, I identify 2 of the mistakes skeptics make that were on my list in my skeptic talk. Firstly, Occam's razor. Is there a simpler explanation you're not considering, and a rational explanation? Now, as I explained before, and many people say this out of habit. I mean, Steve Mehrer is always saying it's a habit phrase. He uses rational explanation. There is no such thing as a rational explanation, only a rational method. Here, Skeptic of the North asks, look, if you are rejecting skeptical explanations for conspiracy theories, ask yourself, conspiracy theorists, why are you doing that? I do. If I reject a skeptical explanation, it's for a reason. Again, a skeptical explanation, again, is that a right? Is it correct to call something a skeptical explanation? Skeptic explanations are either right or wrong. Skeptic of the North has brought up what a lot of psychologists who study conspiracy theories do, which is that if you are a believer in conspiracy theories, you've kind of got knowledge that other people haven't.
you know, the rest of the world is gullible, but you've got the goods. And so there's that psychological allure, that kind of vainglory, which they think motivates us. Yeah, there's an element of truth to that, I must say, and I think that explains the backslapper phenomenon. They want to be the conspiracy. They want to be the conspiracy theorists who look down at the other conspiracy theorists as sheeple. Skeptic of the North compares conspiracy theory belief to a cult or a religion that is fueled by conspiratorial media sources. That's meaningless rhetoric. I can't respond to that. All right, that's another one out the way. So I think we're nearly done. Got a couple more, I think. So yeah, interesting. It's funny, like he was being sort of rational for some of that, for most of that video. At the very end, the last couple of minutes, he just lost it and started ranting and using a lot of like emotive language, adjectives rather than axioms and things like that. But then people do that, you know, that's how it works. All right, guys, we're now on to part 5. So I will share screen there and go on to this one. Where is it? Here we go. Right, this is part 5, and it is called How to Deconvert Conspiracy Theories, Logical Errors. Right, take it away. Or Finding the Truth. Skeptic in the North says at the beginning of part 5, for these conspiracies to work, there'd have to be many people involved. This is a repeat of a point he made earlier. Yeah, which often happens. Well, some secrets they're very good at keeping. Skeptics love Scooby-Doo because it was the guy who ran the water slide, as Tim Minchin's son. Here, Skeptic of the North talks about positive evidence. He compares it to a police investigation, and about how evidence is presented to try and prove something positively, hence the positive evidence. And then he says that the 9/11 Commission essentially did this with the 9/11 atrocity. No, it hasn't. Please read the Omissions and Distortions book by what's his name, Ray Parker Jr. or whatever his name is. David Ray Griffin. The exact opposite. Reasonable explanation now, not rational. 22 now. All right, well, I think what you mean is, where's all the documents? Where's the proof? Where are all the witnesses coming forward and saying, I was involved in the 9/11 attacks, I did it for the government, all right? That, I think, is what you want. It's I want it all, I want it all, I want it all, and I want it now. That's the UFO backslappers and debunkers are always doing this. It's not possible when you're dealing with something that is institutionally suppressed. What we look for instead is what can slip through that net of suppression. At this point, Skeptic of the North brings up what he calls conspiracy theorists relying on negative evidence. And to explain what he says, he begins by showing Jesse Ventura, the conspiracy theorist, very famously being interviewed by Piers Morgan about 9/11, saying, well, how come they identified the attackers so fast? How come they identified Lee Harvey Oswald so fast, etc., etc.? Well, that's kind of positive. I mean, what Jesse's doing here is kind of positive evidence, isn't it? Well, how's this negative evidence? Skeptic of the North brings up the clip from Loose Change, in which you hear the man saying, well, why is the damage at the Pentagon not consistent with the plane impact? Why are the lampposts knocked over? Why was it with Flight 93 and all this sort of thing? Well, because the wings and the tail folded up neatly and like putting a ship into a bottle. Someone actually said that. They actually said that.
Those next.
I think, again, I think you're demanding evidence that may not be accessible at this time. That's what we've done. No. Skeptic of the North says that when conspiracy theorists ask questions, we're not asking those questions to find information and gain evidence. We're trying to frame our belief in a very rhetorical way. We are noticing anomalies, that is, non-random anomalies, as we talked about in the previous segment. We are identifying those non-random anomalies, and we are trying to find a solution to why they exist and how they fit into the official story. If they don't, then there has to be another explanation. The official story has to be incorrect. But it kind of does. Yeah, that's kind of does, though, doesn't it? Yeah, we know that. Skeptic of the North now explains that with the proper context, these anomalies have essentially been explained. As I say, I don't think these are debunked, apart from the Umbrella Man. They're not debunked. Here, Skeptic of the North says, well, you see, the absence of evidence is just evidence that the conspiracy has suppressed it, and it's as simple as that. That's what we're claiming. We conspiracy theorists actually suggest this. Well, that's partly true. No, it's not unfalsifiable. I mean, if we ask the questions, for instance, that Jesse Ventura asked, the question. Now, he's a mainstream figure, governor of Minnesota. He did like mainstream acting and things. He's got a lot to lose by doing this. If there is a solution to the questions asked that fit within the official story, then the theory is falsified. We know that, and that's
that's a misrepresentation of our position. This is an interesting argument. Skeptic of the North says that we're so busy poking holes in the official story of various narratives that we don't take a step back and look at the logical consistencies of our own positions. That's why we listen to skeptics like you. The Skeptic of the North reiterates the work, the scientific investigation on 9/11 has been done, the official story has been proven true, and people like me are simply wrong. No, there are many people who dispute that. And you can look, I mean, it's up to people. People can look at both sides of this story. All right, Skeptic of the North brings up a right old chestnut. How did they manage to rig the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center with explosives without anybody knowing? They didn't. I've already been into that. Just puts words in our mouth and says, well, you just explain it by saying that one of George W. Bush's relatives was running the security company for the World Trade Center. That's a moot point, though, because conventional explosives were not used. Don't tell me you're going to say now that Dr. Judy Wood's ideas are an example of the unicorn to disprove the theory when nothing else works. You're going to claim, I mean, I can't remember if he actually said this in the video or not, but I've got a feeling he's going to claim that. There was a guy who used to go to the David Icke Forum meetups who was actually involved. He was actually a demolition expert. He actually planted these explosives and brought down buildings. Whether he's being honest or whether he's lying deliberately, this is a distraction from what really happened, as Dr. Judy Wood has demonstrated in her book. Oh God, this is the bloody BBC. This idiot went on the BBC, didn't he? They were built in the 60s and early 70s, but yeah. Never go on the BBC. As I explained earlier, I was asked to be on the BBC and I said not a chance. Skeptic of the North says he used to be a believer in 9/11 conspiracy theories, but this moment of watching Richard Gage make that ridiculous gaffe was like a turning point for him, because it meant that he couldn't trust these people who put out alternative ideas to the official explanation. The official explanation has to be true in that case, which is exactly what they want you to think. I know that's a cliche, but it is. Here, Skeptic of the North brings up Occam's razor, which is more likely considering the indisputable facts of 9/11, that is, the buildings collapsing, the planes being hijacked, etc., etc. And he says the only anomalies are basically, well, only anomalies. He accepts that there are anomalies, which are that the CCTV of the Pentagon, plane hitting the Pentagon, as all but one scene has been classified, and that there's various anomalies to do with Hani Hanjour, the pilot. That's because they won't show it to us. They won't show any of the CCTV footage except that little clip where you can't actually see what hit the Pentagon. And then you've got to ask yourself, if they're going to release that, why don't they release something else that shows it more clearly? Why release this something so ambiguous? Skeptic North addresses the Pentagon and the fact that there are contradictory evidence. There is contradictory evidence to do with the Pentagon, like the hijacking of the plane, then how it appears not to have been struck by the plane, yet too many witnesses actually saw it happen for then not for a plane to have been there. It's something that I haven't quite worked out myself yet. But just because there are no actual narratives that completely cohere at the moment does not mean that the official story is correct when you put it into the context of the entire event. I mean, I don't have the information to dispute that to hand, and I'm not going to look it up right now. I know other people have come up with ideas. I'm not against the idea that a plane hit the Pentagon. I'm not against that idea. It's perfectly possible. It doesn't mean the entire 9/11 official story is true, though, or something that looks like a plane anyway. All right, how many extraordinary points? I'm not going to repeat that again. I'm not going to repeat the point. I make this idea is purely qualitative. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But to me, the idea that 19 guys, hardware tools, NORAD, planes hitting buildings accurately, buildings turning to dust, that to me is extraordinary. And there's no extraordinary evidence for that. I've read it. For Skeptic of North refers to the famous debate from the Loose Change producers and Popular Mechanics team, claiming that Popular Mechanics completely won that debate. Seen it. They didn't destroy the arguments. I have filled Miles's comment boxes with comments about that. Miles did not discredit. He did not discredit the conspiracy theory cover stories. Why is that? Skeptic of the North once again makes the point, accusing us of saying, well, if the answers to this conundrum of 9/11 don't fit our belief systems, then we're not interested in hearing them. No, we don't. I don't accept the answers because they don't make sense. They don't fit with the hypothesis presented by the mainstream. Here he says, yes, but you don't provide a better theory that accounts for the facts of what happened that day. I think Dr. Judy Wood has, at least for some of it, like the World Trade Center part. Here, Skeptic of the North brings up the Dunning-Kruger effect. This is a fallacy in which people are unable to accept the basically the limits of their own abilities, and they therefore think they're more intelligent than they are. This is what I'm aware that I may do this, which is why I engage with dialogues like this. I mean, what more can I actually do? Is there more I can do apart from that, or apart from taking David Smith's advice and going on to a radio show which is all about insulting and fighting? I could do that. I mean, or someone who believes that a disease that swept the world could come from a market. Yeah, and maybe the solution to that is to simply engage in dialogue with people who disagree with you. I mean, to be fair to Mick West, he does this. A lot of his channel is all about having conversations with people who disagree with him. I've actually had debates with him in the comments sections, you know. Now, Skeptic of the North brings up, which is one of his most famous quotes, which is, "How do you know what you know?" He doesn't actually say the words in this section, but he's basically coming on to that point here. Now, this is what Stephen Law calls an intellectual black hole. You've got to read his book, Believing Bullshit, it's called. Great title, where he talks about that. But I asked him when he spoke at Skeptics in the pub, are you sure you were not in an intellectual black hole? This next segment, Skeptic of the North brings up teleology. This is the idea that there's a purpose behind things. They exist for a purpose, and they're actually intended. There's intention behind the purpose that they serve. This is sometimes true and sometimes false, of course. Right. Yeah, but then, of course, that you could apply that to anything. You could, again, to give the example of the death of Diana in the tunnel in Paris, the shit happens argument has been applied all the time to that, including people like Nick Pope. And I've already explained why I think that's not correct. Now, serious scientists are saying this now. They're not saying it's God, but they've essentially got an alternative, which is like parallel universes, infinite number of parallel universes. They are saying that, but they're not. You know, some are saying, well, it is God, but others are saying, no, it is a parallel universe. I mean, the only alternative is that it's God, because they suddenly realized that the fine-tuning of the laws of physics can't have happened randomly. Yeah, I mean, that's true, actually. You know, even though I'm not like a pure Darwinist, as I've explained, some life can be explained like that. It's simply an adaptation to the environment and things like that, yeah. Here, Skeptic of the North quotes Dr. Patrick Lehman, who he correlated belief in conspiracies to the magnitude of the event concerned. So, I mean, Nick Pope made this point with Diana's car crash. People get killed by drunk drivers all the time, but when it happens to Diana, because she's a famous person, therefore conspiracy. So, so there's this kind of like the teleological argument only applies because something is of such purport. Well, if there's evidence for it, yeah, like as with Diana, yeah, and 9/11. If that evidence was not there, I would accept that it was just a random, you know, shit happens situation. I would. Skeptic of the North brings up the strange phenomenon of you just start thinking about an old friend you haven't thought of for years, and suddenly, guess what? They turn up on the street corner as you're walking along. You know, odd coincidence. Yeah, and this is getting into coincidence theory and how, you know, well, it could be a coincidence. Well, if you thought every single time you thought about them, you know, because skeptics will say, well, what about the times you thought about the person and they didn't turn up? Well, what if it happens so many times, all the time, that you think, well, this has to mean something? The skeptics still said it's just a coincidence, which they do. They do. I think skeptics have an anti-teleological, have made the mistake of being too anti-teleological, in my view. I just said earlier on that nothing that's physically possible is so unlikely that you can say that can never happen. Skeptic of the North now brings up a point that I actually cannot discuss on YouTube now because the rules have changed since I originally uploaded the original version of this film. Please watch Dr. Len Horowitz's video on that. He wasn't a random insignificant loser. He fits the profile of being a CIA asset for either side in the Cold War. He had lots of sort of like green flags placed on his record, so he was never stopped. Oh, I could go on. I'll cover that more. I'm going to do a special video about the Kennedy assassination at the anniversary in November. But it's not right, not just because of, well, it doesn't feel right because of teleology. There's evidence it's not right. Is there evidence, or is there not evidence? That's the question I want to know. I can answer that question. Let's just take one of those examples, the one I've used already, the death of Diana in the tunnel in Paris. Is it more likely that someone who a lot of people wanted dead, and a lot of people breathed a sigh of relief when she was killed, even those who weren't involved in her murder, is it possible that they were just lucky and she just happened to die at the convenient time, and that the 17 traffic cameras were switched off? There was a complete breakdown in normal medical practice, normal police practice, normal forensic practice, and normal engineering practice when it comes to the forensic engineers from from Mercedes. Is it possible that all these things, all these strange anomalies happened by coincidence? Or it is more simple and far more parsimonious. She was bumped off. She was bumped off using a method that has been identified by people like Ranulph Fiennes and David Tomlinson, the Boston brakes. They cripple the car with this explosive planted on the axle, and then if she survives the crash, someone goes in there and then finishes her off with a lethal injection. Which is more likely? Come on. I do believe they could chance. I do, and if there's evidence for that, yes. But the evidence is different. Well, shit does. If there's evidence that it happens, and that's where the evidence points, fair enough. But it doesn't. Right, that's another part out of the way. So there's one more part to go. All right, guys, we're on to the last part of this deconversion course. There's just one more chance the skeptic in the North has to deprogram me and everyone watching this video. How's he going to get on, I wonder? Let's just see, shall we? So let's see. We're nearly there. If we can get through this, guys, if you could hold firm for another 22 minutes, then we've made it through to the other side, and we're still proud woo-woos. I'll just go through this, and I'll do a little summing up at the end. But here we go. In this final segment of his conspiracy theory deconversion course, Skeptic of the North is going to discuss denialism, the simple refusal, the willful refusal to believe in facts or to admit you believe in something. Yeah, in which you then use the term denier and denial, and well, not you do, and a lot of other people do, as I said, Mark Linus, George Monbiot, to reply to people who don't believe the consensus on climate change. And he's making the same point I am. I don't know you specifically, but skeptics and mainstream people use that word specifically for the purpose of the connotations of immorality to people who question anthropogenic climate change. He says there are argumentative traits within denialism in which give the appearance as a legitimate argument being made when there isn't. Basically, the traits that he's been discussing throughout this series of videos that he's made. And those who engage in denialism tend to be the ones who, through their own eyes, believe that they are engaging in critical thought, that is, brave mavericks going up against the lying establishment. Things we are, that's the thing. I think, for the most part, we are. Skeptic in the North addresses the difference between denialism and scientific skepticism. Provisional acceptance, yeah, and that's kind of lifted from that little description of themselves, which, as I explained in my Skeptic talk, is false. Not true. I think we've been through this in the previous segments of this video. Now, this is one point he makes, which I think is valid. I think, how do you know what you know? Yeah, that's a question we should all ask ourselves. I suppose I'm trying to do the same thing as you are, but so far I haven't changed my opinion, and I've explained why. So I think that's perfectly reasonable, which is exactly what Matt Dillahunty does not do, David Smith. So why do you see him as the ultimate arbiter of truth and reason? Go on his show if you want to you've got to go on his show. You've got to. Yeah, but you see, the world there's absolutely no doubt the world is being drawn towards more and more authoritarianism and internationalism. That's absolutely indisputable. Different supposedly independent countries are introducing the same policy. You've got to ask, well, why is that just a coincidence? Or I'm sure skeptics will say it is. Or is this definitely a trend that's going on? And the BBC is totally independent of the government. No, the BBC is owned by the bloody government. But no one ever says that. They make this criticism of RT, but they don't make that criticism of the BBC. I'm not going to comment on this particular subject because I want this video to be on YouTube. I know that our side lies. I mean, there are people, large numbers of people, and I've covered this in a recent video, who have been on TV in Mexico saying that some fake mummies are aliens, and they're not. And these people know they're not, but they're still saying they are. Large numbers of people apparently qualified. So yeah, I know our side lies. That's what I did over those supposed aliens in Mexico, didn't I? Here, Skeptic in the North makes a statement that's related to the Dunning-Kruger effect. That people think, well, because someone else knows it, I know it. There's so much information out there, and we only have a tiny piece of it as individuals. Yet somehow we feel we have all that knowledge. Are we supposed to all go and set up our own laboratories? I mean, we could do, but I mean, most of us don't have the resources to do that. We're dealing with incomplete information and trying to make the best out of it. He suggests that we should use like a conversation with the Socratic method. Indeed, Mick West does this, letting the conspiracy theorists do the talking, and so therefore we lead ourselves into doubt. Well, this is what I'm trying to do with the skeptics who interact with me, and they're trying to do it. They're trying to do the same thing. When he applies this "how do you know what you know" to an actual event, he says that Donald Rumsfeld had made an announcement that $2.3 million was missing from the Pentagon's budget and no one could account for it. How do you know that? It's an interesting point, do you? Maybe we should all look into that and find out. The last one is obvious. What it's got to do with 9/11? It's what happened the next day. How many people actually responded to you? Are you selectively choosing the rudest ones to put onto your video? Because I wouldn't have responded like that. I could find the quote if it exists where he said that. If it didn't, fair enough. I'll change my mind. By missing, well, missing could mean an accounting error. It could mean a theft. It could mean embezzlement. It could mean all kinds of things. Well, this is what skeptics do. This is the same as raising the bar. Why didn't the base commander go into the woods? Why didn't he make a recording? If that happened, I'd believe you, but until then, there's just not enough evidence. I'm just quoting from a previous video I made, indicating how often skeptics use this method. Yes, I'm feeling so uncomfortable, I can't bear it. That's why I've made this really, really long video response. And skeptics do it. Honestly, man, I don't know how many of you who are believers like me, how often have you actually joined skeptic forums and posted under your own name or your own identity with your own genuine views? And see what happens. How often do you get rational exchanges? How often are you treated respectfully and engaged, and you have some kind of Socratic dialogue brought in? How often does that happen? Because you know how often did it happen to me? Once or twice in all the times I used to be on skeptic forums. Apart from that, it was like being the internet equivalent of a lynch mob beating me to death. The Skeptic of the North says that the collapse of World Trade Center 7 is one of the key components of 9/11 conspiracy theories, and that it's actually not. It's one of many, but this is the one he believes is central. I mean, officially, it wasn't even mentioned in the Commission report. Skeptic of the North carries on talking about Building 7 and making the point that many people know the famous footage from one side of the building, but there is also footage from the other side of the building that apparently tells a different story. And there's, of course, the penthouse collapse and the report connected to that. I know the penthouse goes in first, all right? You see it go in first, a good few seconds before the rest of the building falls. We know that. The penthouse contained the lift machinery and things like that. Yeah, I know that happened. And so people are saying, well, because that superstructure did climb, it means the internal structure of the building was failing first. Okay, I assert no conventional explosives were used in bringing this down. This doesn't mean it collapsed naturally, and it doesn't explain its omission from the Commission report. Skeptic of the North asks, well, why do 9/11 truthers always omit this? Why do they always leave out the bit about the progressive collapse, apparently, and the other side of the building which looks different? Well, they don't. Ian R. Crane never did. Judy Wood never did. It doesn't, though, does it? If people are not ignoring it, it doesn't. Falling down to the side, I'm familiar with this. Things are falling down to the side. It's not the same. It's not the same. That's not a fair comparison. And it softened the steel, didn't it, the way a forge does, even though it's completely open and fueled by office furniture. Yeah. The North reminds us that when we're watching the WT7 collapse in this famous video, we're only seeing the outer shell, not the inside. It was made of steel frames, and there are no large pieces breaking off or large pieces standing still. Like the building in Tehran had large pieces falling to one side, but it didn't exactly make much of a noise. It didn't create much vibration when it hit the ground. Point Skeptic of the North says, well, he, among other things, like the supposed
substandard study from the Fairbanks team, which he's ultimately qualified to comment on. He said, well, if it was a controlled demolition, how come there was no sound of explosives coming from the building? There was no explosives. You expect me to believe? I'm not. I haven't said that, have I? At this point, Skepticism says, well, if it's a conspiracy, how come there's nothing on WikiLeaks about this? Well, I can't remember if I make this point in the video, but of course the backslappers will say, because Julian Assange is a shill. Well, it could be there's another explanation. Maybe that's what they're holding back to stay alive. Dead man's trigger. People say that about UFOs.
They're bare.
And I want it all and I want it now. At this point, Skeptic of the North says, well, look, if skeptics were presented with the kind of evidence that would back up these claims about 9/11, for example, then the skeptics would be forced to change their minds. Are you serious? All we need to do is provide the evidence the skeptics want, and they will all change their minds overnight. I changed my opinion about those things in Mexico. Why did I do that? If I'm just a loony who never changes my opinion on everything. Well, that's it. That's the end of it. Now, the thing is, I am open to reasoned arguments, which is why I've done such a detailed deep dive and dissection of this particular series. It's taken me a long time. It's taken me a very long time indeed. Now, in terms of factual information, there's not an awful lot in there that I'm not already familiar with, because it has been circling the skeptosphere for quite a long time now. We mentioned stuff by Gerald Posner, you know, the 9/11 skeptics and stuff like this. I think this does hold some validity because the person who presents it, Skeptic of the North, whatever his real name, is a former conspiracy theorist. He's someone I would have met and would have been on my side. He knows how we think. He knows how to try and persuade us. But on the evidential basis, he falls short. I think the only part of that particular series I think is completely penetrating was, how do you know what you know? That's a valid question. You want to avoid the intellectual black hole that Stephen Law talks about. Once you're in the intellectual black hole, according to him, and I know Stephen Law. I've read his book. I've been to some of his talks. It's difficult to see out. Just like when you're in a real black hole, you can't see anything outside the black hole in the universe. I can't prove I'm not. All I'm doing is I'm now making an effort to see whether I am or not. Now, a lot of you are going to be thinking, am I one day going to follow in the footsteps of Skeptic of the North or Brent Lee? And indeed Neil Sanders, it seems. I can't rule that out. I might one day become a skeptic. And, despite the price I would pay for that, in terms of my social circles, if that was the case, I would own up and I would say that I was. I actually think with me as a conspiracy theorist and paranormal believer, ufologist, it's unlikely that I will change my mind, simply because I have been practicing this type of open-mindedness for a very long time. I know, in the same way that Skeptic in the North knows how conspiracists think, I know how skeptics think. I'm familiar with their arguments. And I think it's ironic, actually, because in this interview in the video, you can find it on the channel, where it's worth watching, where Brent and Skeptic of the North are talking. He says at one point in the interview, he says, quote, "When I was a conspiracy theorist, I hated the debunkers." In other words, he had this emotional aversion to people who didn't agree with him. And ironically and paradoxically, from a superficial perspective, it is people like him. It's for that reason, I think, that he has changed his mind. It is the biggest zealot who is least tolerant of those who disagree, who is by far the most likely to cross the aisle and join them. And this point was made very well, actually. I mean, Christopher Hitchens is mentioned several times in the video. There's a biography of Christopher Hitchens called Unhitched by Richard Seymour. And he puts the point very well, that this same point, because he thinks that people like that are so easily feel betrayed, because they are so focused on one side of the debate. When it lets them down, they feel they almost turn against it in anger, a quest for revenge. Someone actually said the other day, I think it was Richard Dolan? I was watching a UFO video and someone was, it was Joe Merger on Disclosure Team. He said, "I know so many people, they used to be on our side and now they're debunkers. They're debunkers because they've run out of patience." So their response to this frustration is to go the opposite way.
See, I've never felt hostility to skeptics because they're skeptics. Even those who are former woo-woos like me, the only ones I feel hostility to on both sides of the debate are those who've shown rudeness, aggression, antisocial behavior towards me. At one point this guy, Skeptic of the North, he says something very interesting, which I said I would come back to. Why do we conspiracy theorists feel such distrust for the mainstream media and their experts, yet champion every word alternative experts say as gospel truth? Are alternative experts, so-called, not capable of lying? And he shows the pie chart and stuff like that for the climate scientists and the architects and engineers. And it's true, like the mainstream side vastly outnumbers us, but I don't think it is just a simple election, and I've explained several reasons why. And I had to think about a while to answer that point, though, in full, what he gives, because he's obviously an intelligent chap who has presented this case well. To be honest, I'm still mulling it over, because I know that human beings are very varied, and there's people of all kinds have weaknesses and vices, but as I said earlier, I hinted this, there is something inherently different between the mainstream and alternative sides that can't just be mirrored in the way so many of things have been mirrored. I've noticed there's simply symmetry and mirroring in so many of the points this guy makes. There's something inherent that you can't say about that, and that is that among Illuminati-occupied institutions, there is something inherently and especially dishonest about them. Or to be more precise, the way people behave when they're under the influence of those institutions. And believe it or not, I have the perfect example in my own experience, and it is my discharge from the NHS hospital portering service. Not one single person within the management system deviated in the tiniest way from the objective of removing me, even though some of them, maybe most, maybe all, knew that the case against me was a bogus one and that they valued me as a porter. Now, I know there are liars, there are charlatans, and there are fools in the conspiracy sphere, in the paranormal field, in ufology. I've been targeted by them myself. But at no time during these various troll dramas and these outrages, these manufactured lynch mobs, was there the unity of purpose that you see in the mainstream world. The robotic mindlessness, the conformist copycat behavior. Skeptic of the North started out from a similar position to myself, like Brent Lee did, but for whatever reason, he's moved on to a different onto a different track, and he wants to see the world in another way. And I think he's made a mistake. I bear him no ill will for that. He didn't change his beliefs. I didn't change mine. I want to thank him for putting this course together. It's been very interesting to explore it. I have, like I said, played almost all of it. I think that was necessary for the reasons I've explained. But I bear him no ill will. I wish him all the best for the future. And so there you are. So there, I think now, ladies and gentlemen, you can safely say that I don't know about you. I don't know how you feel right now, but I myself have confidently and safely come to the end of this conspiracy theory conversion therapy. As you know what, I'm not a skeptic. I'm still a crazy, mad woo-woo when I... The plural of anecdote is not data. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary explanations. It's good to be open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brain falls out. Farewell, my loonies. Get a life. You're wrong and I'm right and I'm a skeptic.